Well, with that, let's go ahead and get going. Thank you. Well, for the record, I want to open the July 17th meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission, and thank you to commissioners and members of the public, as well as our invited presenters, for joining us today. I appreciate your participation. And I think, Stacy, are you going to be running the slide deck, or is Judy?
Stacy will be doing that today.
I am, and it's pulling up right now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stacy. And you can kind of run us through how to use Teams.
So I'm Judy Stockwell, and I'm running you through Teams here. Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm a public service representative here at Odo. So at the Teams, the first bubble you see there is a chat bubble. Click that to follow the chat or enter any questions that you have. The next one is the hand icon. Click this to raise your hand if you have any question or comment, and remember to click it again to lower it when you're finished. The third one is the smiley icon. Click that to leave any reactions if you'd like. Down a little further, you'll see the video options. That's your camera icon. Turns the camera on and off. Next to that is the microphone icon. It turns your microphone on and off during the presentation. Please leave the microphone muted or off to minimize any background distractions unless the presenter asks you to turn on your microphone. And thank you very much.
Thank you. And it looks like we have a couple of folks who are having a little bit of challenge, including Commissioner Vasuchinsky. So if you can maybe help him get his camera and mic going, that'd be great. Next slide. So today we are going to hear about the Natural Climate Solutions and Metrics Analysis Project, and we'll be hearing from staff at Odo and RTI on that, and then we'll be taking public comment, and we have, I think, 5 people who have signed up already to provide public comment. If you want to provide public comment but did not sign up in advance, you can raise your hand when we get to that agenda item to be able to provide public comment. Then we will take a vote on one of 3 options for updating our natural climate solutions or natural working lands net carbon sequestration and storage goal. We'll take a break after that, and then we'll come back and kind of do an update and discuss progress towards developing our 2026 report to the legislature, and then adjourn. That's kind of what we're going to be working on today. And before we go to the agenda items, I just wanted to provide an opportunity for any commissioners to provide updates on things that you have been working on or following that you want to make sure everybody else is aware of. Oh, Commissioner Vasuchinsky.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share some information. So I'm the Sustainability Director for Multnomah County, and we've been working over the past several years to develop a new climate plan for the county. Since 2021, or I'm sorry, since 2001, we've had several climate plans, and this is just the latest iteration, but I'm really proud of this effort because we set out to kind of develop a different kind of plan. We're calling it our climate justice plan. We work really closely with frontline community organizations and individuals to understand what priorities Multnomah County residents had, particularly if they're on the front lines of the climate crisis because of poverty or immigration status or language barriers, et cetera. worked with a lot of youth. And after that, we brought in out our engagement and engaged with as many people as we're willing to. I think our total stands at over 1,400 individuals that we engaged with at this point. And finally, after all that time, we're bringing it to the Board of County Commissioners for the review and approval this upcoming Thursday, the 23rd. So if you're interested, I put a link to the plan into the chat, and you can submit written comments or come in person or join virtually and to attend the board meeting. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Chair, you're muted.
Sorry. Commissioner Steckler.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, I just wanted to say that I have been attending quite a few of the Pacific Northwest Climate Week events this week, and they've been really great and informative. All the ones that I've attended this week have been in Portland, and I'm getting lots of ideas potentially for next year. So I'm hoping that we can organize an event or two next year, maybe in multiple places around the state. So it's been a really positive event, and just looking forward to participating in the following years.
Great. And that's happening in Portland and Bend.
Correct.
And Seattle and Vancouver, yep. BC.
Yep.
Nice. Thank you. Director Bateman.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Brenda Bateman, Director of the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And I'm going to put in the chat in a moment 2 new resources that DLCD has recently been part of or released. We've been part of 2 coalitions, and I think you'll be very excited about these tools. I know we are. The first is a handbook for analyzing greenhouse gas emission reductions. And so we partnered with 3 other state agencies, Metro, and 5 Western states to put together this handbook that helps communities plan their greenhouse gas emissions. And it actually provides some methodology to quantify GHG reductions for specific projects that they might be involved in. So there's a link there to that handbook. And then the second one that I wanted to bring to your attention is a blue carbon calculator. As you know, coastal wetlands are among the most powerful carbon sinks that we have. And so this calculator helps determine potential greenhouse gas emission effects from various types of projects in coastal wetlands, everything from restoration and conservation to excavation, diking, draining, and impoundment. So we're very excited about these tools. I'll put that in the chat right now.
Great. Thank you, Director Bateman.
Thank you all.
Commissioner Dotson.
Great, thank you. Good to see everyone. I just wanted to mention from the Data Center Advisory Committee that there will be another meeting on July 31st. The agenda is not yet online. I think it's okay if I hint that I think diesel generation and a continuing discussion about incentives will be on that agenda. So, not necessarily about climate change, but it kind of, the way it has worked out is climate change almost seems to come up in every meeting. So for anyone interested, I encourage you to tune in. There'll be an opportunity for public comment, as well as an opportunity to hear the presentations that we'll be hearing. And I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat for people.
Thank you, Commissioner Dotson. Yeah, I've been listening in to the meetings, and very informative. It's been very interesting. Vice Chair Apter.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention, and this is really DEQ's updates. I'm not sure if I'm seeing anyone from DEQ there, but because this commission has shown a lot of interest over years and recently in the climate protection program, I did want to make sure folks had seen the very exciting announcement last week at the Environmental Quality Commission meeting that DEQ has selected a provisional entity to administer the Community Climate Investment Program. They've selected CalSTART as the provisional CCI entity. I think folks know, but this has been, many, many months process, extensive input from the Equity Advisory Committee that's set up under the CPP, and just a really important milestone in CPP implementation and, one step closer to getting these investments out into communities. So again, don't mean to steal DEQ's thunder, but it is a very exciting update. If anyone is on from DEQ that I may have missed, welcome others to chime in, but I'll drop a link or just dropped a link into the DEQ press release.
Thank you, Vice Chair Apter. Director Bell.
Thank you, Chair, and morning, Commissioners. It's good to be in virtual community. I have a quick update on the federal front. So over the last several days, and specifically, I believe it was July 11th, the Road to Housing Act was passed. I know we're in such a moment where there's a lot to be mesmerized by on the federal front. This is a good and productive thing in order to move forward. While on its face, it is both a bipartisan piece of legislation and one that is primarily focused on housing policy, there are also significant climate implications within that bill. I think it is probably one of the most significant that directly sees housing policy as climate policy, which I think raises the ceiling and possibility in terms of opportunity in a lot of ways. Without going through, of course, all of the nuts and bolts of it, it does explicitly recognize that housing supply and finance influence climate outcomes. And so within those provisions, to which there are several, it includes provisions related to home repairs, energy and water efficiency upgrades. It also looks at deferred maintenance before efficiency improvements and long-term energy performance. I think one of the other notions in there that's also been really exciting, particularly here in Oregon on the intersection of manufactured housing. It also includes housing standards regarding energy conservation standards for manufactured housing that have historically been a little bit outdated. There's also some really important and I think really exciting regarding reduction of emissions, poor construction choices, and putting some standards and also flexibility around it. So all to say, of all the things that are happening, there's a lot of good that's continuing to happen as well from that piece of legislation. So I imagine we'll be digging into that, and certainly as there are formidable and specific things to bring to the council on the intersection of housing, we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear that. Nice that was bipartisan, and great that it's been pushed through. Commissioner Ackerman Munson, sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. Yeah, you remember me as just Ackerman, so. I have two things. One is just a request for information from anybody that might have it. Folks may know that we passed the Climate Resilience Investment Act last year. And as part of that, just transition is required for us to consider within, to report on within our public equities portfolio. I'm from Treasury. And I'm in the middle of, our team is in the middle of really thinking about how do we do that while also making sure that we're honoring our fiduciary responsibility to our beneficiaries. I've gotten great advice from organizations like Ceres, Sierra Club. We're actively talking to folks about this. And so I thought this is a good forum to ask the question. If anybody has resources, information, I'd love to meet with you and talk one-on-one with you about that. The second thing that I wanted to just update folks on is on the investment side of things. There's a concern right now. The Securities and Exchange Commission is trying to pull back on saying that climate risk is a material risk in financial investments. So our team here, we are working on a letter. It's a comment period right now. They're trying to rescind the rule that says, essentially, I'm shorthanding things a little bit, but the climate risk is a material risk. So we're writing a letter saying climate change is a material risk. This is why we're concerned about it. And we're working with other treasurers and others around the country who are also leaning into this. So if anyone's interested in that angle, that piece that we're trying to be leaders in both not just here, but around the country to support having a voice on these kind of conversations. So those are two things I want to just update on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Representative Gamba.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Just wanted kind of a little piece of good news. I just returned from the annual convening of the Western Energy Caucus, which is bicameral, bipartisan group of legislators from all over the West that are working towards building out our electric system, predominantly for the purposes of greening our electric system. And we did a lot of good work this last session on wildfire, not only liability, but prevention from the standpoint of the utilities, and a lot of consensus around changes to the way data centers are regulated in order to begin to reduce their impact. It's just very hopeful to me that there's folks from both sides of the aisle that are working on these. So
Great, good news to hear. And will there be a report out on the meeting that you attended?
not if I have to do it.
Okay.
There's as it goes along, it's kind of a slow process. We only get to meet once a year, and it's only for a few days. And obviously, we're tackling massive issues, and so it's a little bit incremental. It's just, and I think that's maybe why it's been able to remain bipartisan, is that it doesn't feel fast and scary to some folks. It feels very manageable. As really important things arise, I will report out.
Great. Thank you so much. Sarah Reif.
Yes, good morning, Chair McDonald and members of the commission. I'm Sarah Reif. I'm the Habitat Division Administrator with ODFW. Sitting in for Director Colbert this morning, and I will be posting in the chat a number of story maps that our staff have created. So we are natural and working lands biologists that were funded with natural working lands funds from the Climate Commission have created story maps highlighting, I think there's 4 or 5 of our great projects that were also funded through the Natural and Working Lands Fund. Excited for you all to take a look at those and see those, and welcome any feedback you have if there's, facets that you're not seeing to the story that we're telling that you think would be helpful to all the work that the commission is doing. We welcome that input, but it's just good things are happening with the funding, and wanted you all to see some of the exciting work that's going out on the ground.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. I got a chance to look at them this morning, and they're really great. So thank you for doing that. Senator Golden.
Good morning. It is good to
Good
be
morning.
here. I wanted to, if you're not aware, let you know that we are in a really difficult week with regard to wildfire right now, with Doug Graff and others really as concerned as I've heard them. There is one of the larger ones is in my district, or right next to it, at about 12,000 acres and growing, and with really unfavorable conditions. The conditions of the vegetation are, unprecedented for this time of year. There also are several, some of them sizable and growing on the east side, which, as far as I know, are not getting much publicity, but they're getting a lot of notice. Those, I was told last night, will take out quite a few homes on the east side in smaller communities. So we got a long summer ahead, and I chair the Natural Resources and Wildfire Committee, and I'm going to hop off momentarily to a meeting of the Program Advisory Council, Wildfire Advisory Council, to get more briefed. So I don't know much more to say about that, other than any way you can be involved in your own communities and heightening people's awareness about prevention and risk reduction is really helpful. We're going to approach, I would imagine, within the next couple, 3 weeks, we're going to be really feeling the pressure of resource shortages in different places. So, we know the connection to all that, to the work of this commission. I'm actually leaving the legislature, so I won't say much about, unlike Representative Gamba, so I won't say much about what I'm hearing from legislators about legislation they'll be bringing that relates to all this work. I will say that, of course, we all know the Prosperity Council has, one of their recommendations has been to shift to a cap and trade system. And a group of us have been saying for a long time, we welcome conversation, but there's no openness to leaving behind our climate protection program until and unless a new system, a rigorous system, is actually in place and producing revenue. And that gets into sort of a political back and forth. At any rate, thank you. And I hope other than fire concerns, we've got a great summer ahead.
Yes, thank you, Senator Bolden. It's sobering news. And be thinking very good thoughts for all of our communities in Oregon. Commissioner McNichol.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. I just want to thank Senator Gamma for bringing up the cap and trade, cap and invest opportunity or threat, depending on how you look at it. And I hope that we will, as a commission, pay close attention to that and to the transition and be outspoken about, particularly if there's cap and invest, cap and trade, how the funds from that are used, because there's a lot of threat to that as well, in my opinion. So I want to highlight that. It's really great to see the CPP milestone that Commissioner Apter mentioned, and it's a huge concern. It's a huge part of the Tiger analysis about how we get to our goal is the CPP. So if we lose it and we lose time, the present value of that time we lose we'll never get back. So anyway, that's
very important points. And we'll be talking about the biennial report and the work that different committees will be taking on, including CPP and any cap and invest discussions. So thank you for raising that. I'm not seeing other hands up. So I think we can go to our next agenda item. And with that, I'm excited that we'll be hearing about this metrics analysis for natural and working lands work. It's really an important part of understanding the potential of the land sector in addressing climate change. And so this is very timely because after that agenda item and some public comment, we'll be voting on a goal for net sequestration in natural and working lands. So with that, I'll turn it over to Liz and Jason to kick us off here.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Vice Chair. It's nice to be with everyone today again. Really appreciate your continued attention to this subject. I know we have been visiting the Commission a lot this past year, and so just really appreciate your time and attention. We'll be talking about our third major project for the Natural Climate Solutions Program today. Next slide. So as I've done before, I'm going to set this work in the context of the biggest climate action picture, right? Climate action fits under two major categories. We need to rapidly reduce our emissions and also increase our actions that remove carbon that is already in the atmosphere. And we need to do both of these things to stop global temperatures from rising. If all emissions were to stop tomorrow, we would still need to remove excess greenhouse gases from the atmosphere from previous emissions. For this reason, considering the role Oregon's lands play in addressing the challenge of stabilizing and reducing atmospheric greenhouse gases in tandem with emissions reduction strategies is not only worthwhile, but it's necessary to solve our problems and secure a future. Next slide. So as I have shared previously, in 2023, the legislature passed House Bill 3409, which acts on this commission's proposal from 2021. And it included a package of bills that did a lot of great things in relation to climate resilience, many of which we talk about here together. And the natural climate solutions section, it defined the natural climate solutions as you see on the slide. And it set state policy on natural climate solutions implementation. And it also defined climate resilience and natural and working lands, two important terms we hear a lot about. It requested that we look at the nature-based workforce as a whole for the first time. It created the Natural and Working Lands Fund, which is the implementation aspect of this work. And it directs us to establish 2 greenhouse gas tracking systems, which you see on the screen. Next slide. So the purpose of these tracking systems is to account for our actions and track progress, of course. Important information is learned from tracking land-based trends at the landscape scale and also tracking specific land management actions over time for NCS. We're talking about these strategies, these NCS strategies in depth today, and the information we have been able to coalesce to date. Maintaining these 2 accounting systems has its advantages. You know, an inventory provides a holistic look at what is happening on the landscape and how large-scale land use and land cover change is affecting land-based emissions and removals. While tracking specific NCS strategies allows the state to be responsive to partners focused most on implementation. It illuminates operational barriers and successes, and it recognizes the limitations currently that we have in the inventory in its construction and capabilities relative to on-the-ground work. Next slide. So before we move on, I just want to take a moment to, over the next 3 slides, to share, of course, that this work involves a lot of people. The NCS statute allows the chair of the commission to convene an advisory group, and this advisory group has met monthly since March 2025. And I can't overstate how incredibly engaged, prepared, and helpful this group has been, how thoughtful they are, how respectful, and what kind of knowledge they're bringing to our work. It's really incredibly important. Next slide. And of course, we've been working in coordination with the 7 land managing agencies that are listed in the statute, as well as DEQ, who have provided data review, constantly answered our emails and our requests amongst their busy work plans and their work in general. And that too, we couldn't do our work without them. For this project specifically, we've also coordinated with the Oregon Health Authority, the Environmental Justice Council, Business Oregon, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, Lincoln and Benton counties, and some of the state's SWCDs. Everyone has such good and important knowledge to provide and share, and we've really valued those conversations. Particularly when it comes to what kind of data the state already gathers, what kind of outcomes or outcome evaluation approaches that we can put together from that data, and thus what metrics we'd like to recommend for the state to track. It's absolutely critical, and so we're going to take additional time this summer to continue our work and our coordination with others. Next slide. Here, just really briefly, I'm showing a summary of the types and amounts of interactions that we've had for this project to date. Next slide. And then before we get into the work itself, it's really important to mention that, right, we're setting up a tracking system and in order to track our progress, we need a data compilation system and the capacity to synthesize and apply the best available quantification data. And we don't have the statewide data compilation or reporting infrastructure that we need at this time. However, there's existing infrastructure we can use or modify in order to capitalize on previous state investments and processes that already exist. And I wanted to take a moment to share those with you. Next slide. So we are incorporating existing assessment tools into the recommended metrics so that partners and agency personnel can calculate outputs from NCS implementation using existing tools that they've worked really hard to create already. We're also incorporating established or emerging reporting infrastructure into our initial approach for tracking progress. You'll see that these tools are not only state-owned or maintained. We are excited and to support and highlight tools and reporting infrastructure from partners, as well as government institutions like universities. And we would love to hear about more tools or reporting infrastructure that we should consider. Next slide. So we've organized today's findings by the major land categories that we use in the inventory. It's our hope that as tracking data gaps are filled, we'll be able to create methodologies to incorporate specific activity data into the inventory so we can reflect the on-the-ground work in our statewide accounting. By assigning each NCS a land category, we are setting a framework for ourselves to align the two tracking systems in the future, hopefully. Next slide. Okay, so on to the actual work. The 2026 list of natural climate solutions contains 33 solutions across 5 land categories, and they fall into 3 general categories that you see on the screen. We will continue to update this list biennially as research is published and more information about land management activities that have carbon benefits becomes available. And the team will be talking about these natural climate solutions in depth today. Next slide. The work began with a search of the literature on mitigation rates and associated community effects. Over 180 articles were reviewed and 45 provided Oregon-specific information. And a deliverable for this project includes creating a data library for the state and partners to draw from, and we'll continue to curate this library as time goes on. Next slide. And the second step was to compile government programs that support NCS implementation. So compiling this information not only told us what infrastructure exists among government enterprise to implement natural climate solutions, but was an important exercise in terms of identifying existing metrics and to understand the work ahead in building a cross-agency reporting infrastructure. About half of the over 100 programs identified support multiple natural climate solutions simultaneously, and many span multiple land categories, which creates opportunities for cross-cutting metrics and integrated tracking. At this time, we'd like you to know we focused on state government programs. So we had desired to include local and partner programs. However, the scope of that task grew in size. Mapping all of the players at a systems level is important to overall success of increasing the pace and scale of NCS implementation in the state. And so we aim to continue to compile and curate this information over time as available resources. As an available resource for folks to use. The report itself, the forthcoming report, will have several appendices that also give lots of information about the programs that we've compiled. So part of the directive from the statute was to identify specific activity-based metrics that would be able to calculate the carbon benefit of land management activities, but also track the positive and negative effects of NCS implementation on jobs, local economies, the environment, and public health. The total number of preliminary metrics we are working on refining, you see here on the slide, and some apply to just a few natural climate solutions, and others apply to all 33 natural climate solutions. This first cut of metrics were identified from the compilation of government programs and their existing metrics and the literature synthesis that I just mentioned. And the literature identified ecological improvements are often and frequently accompanied by socioeconomic benefits. You can see these benefits on the graphic on the slide, such as reduced production costs, improved public health outcomes, avoided infrastructure damages, and enhanced livelihoods. Trade-offs were also noted and informed metric selection as well. Examples include increased reliance on herbicides in some no-till systems, potential short-term smoke and health impacts associated with some wildfire reduction strategies, challenges in carbon accounting for some fuel treatments, and potential livelihood constraints relative to some land protection-oriented NCS. We are in the middle, as I said, of refining these metrics with agency partners and other experts right now. So today we are going to focus on the natural climate solutions themselves. There's a lot of information to share with you there as well, and the climate mitigation benefit findings the team has produced. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation to RTI, Chris Wade of RTI, who will share an important overview of the work and then go through natural climate solutions per land category and then provide thoughts on future improvements. Chris, welcome. And
Liz, just a quick, so we are going to talk a lot about the community impact metrics or community effects today. We'll talk about that at a future meeting. Is that right?
Correct. We are focusing on the natural climate solutions feasibility aspects and their potential benefit, but we will talk at a later date about metrics specifically and community effects. Chris, are you with us?
I am. Yeah. Thanks, Liz, and thanks, Chair, for having us here today. We can jump to the next slide. Yeah, so as mentioned, this work was conducted by a multidisciplinary team here at RTI International. And while I'm the one presenting, right, there's a large team behind me that have worked really hard on this project and on this assessment. And we have a few members of the team on the call in addition. So Jeff and Hannah are here. And we're happy to answer questions that you might have or follow up with anything that we aren't able to answer kind of off the cuff in real time. So let's jump to the next slide and before we get going, I want to start with just kind of a quick refresher on a few carbon cycle concepts that help frame the results in the analysis. Right, so as we're thinking about natural and working lands, all lands both emit and sequester greenhouse gases. And so a specific piece of land can be either a net source or a net sink, and carbon or other greenhouse gases that are sequestered become part of a stock in either vegetation or soils. Then things like weather patterns, land use change, and disturbances can all alter sequestration rates or release part of those stocks back into the atmosphere. And so the goal with these natural climate solutions is to either increase sequestration, reduce emissions from land use and land cover, or protect existing carbon stocks from loss. And so one terminology note before we continue. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to be using the term climate mitigation or greenhouse gas mitigation. And in this context, we're including both kind of increasing net biological sequestration, as well as avoiding emissions from protecting existing carbon stocks that already exist kind of in natural and working lands. Next slide, please. And so as we're walking through this feasibility assessment, we're really looking across kind of two main dimensions. This figure here on the right is showing those dimensions. So on the horizontal axis, we're showing feasibility to track and quantify the carbon outcomes using available data and methods. And while the vertical axis is representing feasibility to implement in Oregon, including implementation pathways through existing programs, current adoption levels, and climate mitigation potential. And then we have these quadrant labels here really to help us summarize the relative readiness of the evidence. And so importantly, this framework, we're not evaluating implementation cost, affordability, or cost effectiveness. Those are separate questions and won't be included in any of the results we're looking at today. So let's jump to the next slide and we can see a full example and kind of a key takeaway figure from this work. Here we're showing all of the analyzed NCS activities together across those two scores. And so activities that are up in the upper right corner have a comparatively stronger implementation pathway, as well as tracking and quantification capacity. Activities in the upper left have implementation experience, but there might exist tracking gaps of the outcomes. And then activities in the lower left have less complete evidence on both dimensions. And this chart, again, it's a screening framework. We're not trying to rank whether an activity is worthwhile or ecologically important, but just to kind of identify where these various activities exist relative to one another.
Chris, were you surprised that nothing ended up in the bottom right?
Yeah, we were. But then looking back and kind of thinking through why that might be. So for activities that have higher tracking scores, you know, a reason that exists is usually because they have been implemented more and more and across more landscapes. And so you've kind of reduced that uncertainty, right? That piece kind of goes a little more hand in hand. So yeah, I think it's worthwhile to discuss and kind of see. And then we also just want to let, like, these could be blurry lines between the different quadrants, right? This is not a hard and fast, this is a continuous measure. But yeah, that is a great
Oregon
point.
landowners are doing a lot of good work. So
That's very true. Yep. Great, thanks. Yeah, and so let's jump to the next slide, and we can talk through a few more figures that we're going to kind of look at regularly through the presentation. And so before we look at kind of individual NCS activities, I want to help explain kind of how they're constructed. And so for each of the activities, we're looking at 8 specific criteria, which feed into these 2 dimensions shown on the previous slide. 5 of those criteria are contributing to the tracking and quantification dimension, and 3 of those are contributing to the implementation dimension. 2 of the tracking criteria are the availability of activity-based metrics, or ABMs, and community effects metrics, or CEMs. And so activity-based metrics, these describe what was implemented. For example, this could be acres treated, trees planted, or acres using a particular management practice. And those activity measures can then be combined with a carbon metric, such as estimated sequestration or avoided emissions rate, to estimate the greenhouse gas effects of implementation. And then community effects metrics, they're serving a different purpose. They're really used to track socioeconomic and other environmental or ecological effects associated with NCS implementation. And so these could include effects on jobs, income, public health, soil health, water quality, biodiversity, or climate resilience. And importantly, those effects, they can be both positive and negative for each NCS. And so the direction really depends on the location, the way the activity is implemented, kind of the baseline practice that's being replaced, as well as the time period considered. The remaining tracking and quantification criteria also considered include the availability of greenhouse gas estimation methods, the spatial resolution of those methods and estimates, and then outcome certainty. The 3 implementation criteria consider climate mitigation potential, the current adoption rates in Oregon, and whether or not we found kind of established implementation pathways through Oregon-specific programs. And so here we're showing these radar diagrams to help present all of this information. So here the blue half in this figure is summarizing the 5 tracking and quantification criteria, while the green half is summarizing the 3 implementation criteria. And so a fuller and more even shape indicates relatively consistent scores across the criteria, while indentations show where available data, evidence, or methods are less developed. And as we move through the examples, we're going to focus on kind of the overall shape and contrast between 2 profiles within each land category, and kind of highlight the specific areas where maybe additional research or data is needed. And so let's jump to the next slide, and we can actually look at 2 of the profiles as an example. So here we're illustrating the visual difference between kind of a lower scoring feasibility in NCS activity versus a higher scoring. And so on the left, we're looking at wildfire risk reduction practices in grassland and arid lands. And this is a lower scoring example in the feasibility to implement and quantify, right? It's web, it's smaller and more indented, while afforestation in developed land is a more higher scoring example. So this web, it's larger, it's smoother across both halves. And the comparison really reflects kind of the combined pattern of both the implementation criteria and the tracking and quantification criteria. And so as we go through the different land types, we'll actually speak to kind of what might be driving like a lower score relative to a higher score for a few of the NCS activities. All right, next slide, please. Additional figures that we're going to show are these box and whisker plots showing the net mitigation rate graphs. So these are summarized the carbon metrics that were identified, or the greenhouse gas metrics identified in the literature. And so these metrics are a per unit rate used with an activity-based metric to estimate a climate mitigation benefit. So the activities listed here on the left, and the horizontal axis shows the rate. And then the line inside each of those bars, the vertical line, is showing the median, while the box represents the middle half of all estimates from the literature. The whiskers show the broader range, excluding any statistical outliers that might have been found. And then if there's a star, like on this lower box example on the far right, this is showing an outlier that we've dropped from those kind of aggregate measures in the box and whisker. We don't have estimated mitigation rates for all activities, so you won't necessarily see one for each of the 33 NCS activities. And then for some of the land types, we've separated out specific activities into different graphs due to scaling issues. And this is really driven by some of the NCS activities focus on avoiding emissions of existing carbon stocks. And so these activities usually show kind of a higher sequestration rate relative to activities that might increase sequestration rates. And so here, reduced wetlands and peatland degradation means maintaining or improving wetland conditions. So existing stored soil carbon is less likely to be released and continue to sequester greenhouse gases into the future. All right, one more kind of setting the stage slide before we jump into the results. So we can go to the next one. A few last notes. First, the feasibility assessment is really focused on that feasibility to implement activities and then the capacity to track and quantify carbon outcomes. We're not including cost, as mentioned earlier. Second, the statewide figures are an upper level estimate. And so this is kind of a screening level for mitigation potentials rather than a forecast of expected implementation and adoption of practices. And then third, each of those estimates combines an area available estimate along with the median carbon metric using several simplifying assumptions. And so activities, they might overlap on the same acres, and avoided conversion estimates really depend on the assumed baseline level of land that would otherwise be converted. And so we shouldn't kind of sum up all of the mitigation totals together. That would take a more detailed analysis, looking at kind of trade-offs between the implementation of specific activities. Next slide, please. All right, so some high-level takeaways before we get into the nitty-gritty. So at a high level, Oregon has a broad portfolio of natural climate solutions at its disposal. 9 of the evaluated profiles fall within that ready now quadrant, so that upper right. And while there's others that have either specific tracking or methodological needs, the ability to implement and to rely on these activities seems relatively high. Among the quantified estimates, forest activities account for some of the largest mitigation potential estimates, if you're thinking purely in kind of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We also found that there are many of the NCS activities that can affect more than carbon. So there's many that influence things such as jobs, income, public health, soil health, water quality and availability, biodiversity, and resilience. So you have these co-benefits beyond the greenhouse gases. When we're looking at yeah.
Sorry, just a note, while forests overall represent most of the potential, the per acre potential of blue carbon work is equal to forests. So very important, and also very important from a resilience standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, right? And kind of highlights those co-benefits of many of these activities. And so when we are looking at that mitigation potential, we were able to estimate a value for 22 of the 33 NCS activities. with 15 of those 22 having kind of clear area extents that we could kind of safely assume are feasible to have NCS implemented on them. And then finally, tracking infrastructure really remains kind of uneven across programs and land categories and is kind of a consistent area of potential improvement kind of throughout the different activities. All right, next slide, please. And so just kind of a quick run through of what we're going to look at for each of the different land categories. We'll start with the activities included within that NCS or within that land cover category. We'll then look at the available carbon metrics. We'll look at the draft statewide climate mitigation potential. And then finally, we'll move to the feasibility assessment results. So looking at the quantification and the implementation feasibility for the practices. So let's jump to the next slide and start talking with forest. So in the forest land, we have 7 NCS activities included. This includes reduced forest degradation, forest conservation, protection, and reduced deforestation, wildfire risk reduction strategies, climate smart forestry practices, reforestation and restoration of forest, afforestation, and then riparian area improvement. And so these activities, as you can see in this table, they work through a combination of avoided emissions, continued sequestration, and then protection or expansion of existing carbon stocks. And then as we go forth, reforestation and restoration of forests, so activity ID 5 here, and afforestation, that's activity 6, they've been evaluated together in parts of the feasibility assessment, just because of kind of how the literature looks at these two. And most of the times reforestation and afforestation are presented together in the scientific literature. So let's jump to the next slide and we can look at those net mitigation rates. So here the upper panel is showing forest conservation, protection, and reduced deforestation. And this is an avoided emissions rate, and it's much larger than these kind of annual sequestration rates shown in the figure below. And so this area, what we've tried to do is we're still trying to look at kind of the annual emissions rate here by looking at the historical rate of tree cover loss within the state, and then apply that to our average emissions rate. And so, you know, the best thing that can be done is protecting that land that we already have. The lower panel shows the available carbon metrics for riparian area improvement, the combined reforestation and afforestation profile, climate smart forestry practices, and then wildfire risk reduction strategies. And the width of this range reflects differences across studies, sites, and land quality, and various assumptions that go into these studies. And then as we think about wildfire risk reduction, those pathways, those carbon and greenhouse gas pathways, include both near-term treatment emissions, as well as the potential protection of longer-term carbon stocks and long-term protection of carbon stocks from reducing the risk of severe disturbances. Next slide, please. And so if we start to combine kind of the area that's feasible to have these NCS activities implemented on them with those mitigation rates, we can start to estimate the mitigation potentials. So here, reforestation and restoration of forest and afforestation is our highest, with about 7 million metric tons of CO2e per year. Riparian area improvements we find to be about 2.7 million metric tons, and wildfire risk reduction strategies are about 1.6 million tons. Forest conservation, protection, and reduced deforestation resulted in an estimate of kind of 4 million tons of CO2e per year. And so these are our screening level potentials. Again, you know, not all activities can be applied on the same piece of land. There's some that can and some that can't. So again, we shouldn't be adding these up to come up with a total statewide potential of the forest land. Next slide, please. And so then let's look at forest in that feasibility tracking range. And so here we have a number of activities in that upper right group, that Ready Now group, including reforestation and restoration of forest and afforestation, forest conservation, protection, and reduced deforestation, and riparian area improvement. wildfire risk reduction strategies and climate smart practices and reduce degradation in forest have additional tracking or methodological needs. And the main improvement here, the main piece missing, is really the ability to connect kind of project level reporting, including those activity-based metrics, with spatial forest data, existing forest conditions, and consistent baselines. So what is the counterfactual of this land? What would have happened on that land absent these NCSs being applied? And that baseline piece is a kind of a consistent narrative that we'll hear kind of throughout different land use types. Next slide, please. And so at a high level, wildfire risk reduction strategies in forest land is a relatively higher scoring profile. The web is larger and smoother, while reduced forest degradation in forest land is a lower scoring profile relative to the other forest activities. For reduced forest degradation, the largest indentation is really coming from that outcome certainty. And this is, so degradation, it's not always well defined or measured consistently, which makes it difficult to establish kind of a common baseline and to really link that delta between avoided degradation and the greenhouse gas outcomes. And so that's kind of what's, a main piece kind of driving this lower feasibility score. Let's jump to the next slide and we can move to developed land. So here in developed land, we have 3 specific activities. That includes forest conservation, protection, and reduced deforestation in developed land. So think about urban forestry. Reduced forest degradation in developed land, again, kind of protecting existing urban forestry. And then afforestation in developed land. And so similar to the forestry activities, these work through both reducing or avoiding greenhouse gas emissions, increasing sequestration rates, as well as kind of protecting the greenhouse gas storage or the greenhouse gases that are already stored in these trees. Next slide, please, and we can look at the mitigation rates. So there were less carbon metrics available for these activities. We were able to find kind of clear literature on afforestation in developed land. We have both estimates that are Oregon specific as well as kind of national or regional in nature. And so both of them are finding annual carbon sequestration, kind of increases in annual carbon sequestration by planting more trees within urban areas. With the differences here really reflecting various location differences, tree growth rates, survival rates, as well as accounting assumptions between different studies. And so remember too that carbon is really only part of the picture. And that's why we include these community impact or community effect metrics, which can track things such as shade, heat exposure, stormwater control, air quality, and access to green space. Next slide, please. And so for afforestation in developed land, we identified almost 140,000 acres within the state that have the potential for kind of increased tree cover within urban and rural areas. Combining this with the annual mitigation rate, this resulted in about 240,000 metric tons of CO2e per year potential. Next slide, please. And so looking at 2 of the different categories within or 2 of the different NCS within our feasibility assessment, the afforestation in developed land is that number 10 up in the ready now quadrant, while reduced forest degradation in developed land has larger tracking gaps and less complete kind of implementation pathway data. And the main need here really is consistent kind of urban forestry reporting across jurisdictions. And this could include those activity-based metrics such as amount of trees planted, canopy growth rates, tree condition, and survival rates of planted trees.
Chris,
and so
would reduced forest degradation include pests and pathogens and the impacts of pests and pathogens as an example?
Yeah, that is a great example. Yeah, so
activities facing the emerald ash borer, which is going to impact a number of our developed land areas.
Yeah, and so that is a great example, right? If there are activities that kind of can reduce the risk of emerald ash borer, then right, that's a kind of a clear NCS activity that fits under reduced degradation. And so let's move to the next slide and we can look at those kind of broader scores. And so here we have kind of a clear difference between our two metrics in their shape and coverage. Afforestation and developed land, right? That was the one that scores high in both the feasibility to track and implement. While reduced forest degradation scored lower because it's harder to define and track avoided canopy loss consistently. And so this leads to lower scores for the activity-based metrics. The greenhouse gas estimation methods are less developed too in the literature. The spatial resolution matters a lot, right? So you need to consider that as well, which also kind of impacts that outcome certainty. So this one, right, this is a very kind of a hyper spatially dependent activity, which just kind of leads to some of that uncertainty and a lower feasibility score to track specifically. So let's jump to the next slide and we can speak a little bit to wetlands. So wetlands has 8 activities, including the protection and avoided conversion of wetlands and peatlands, reduced wetland and peatland degradation, peatland restoration, protection and avoided conversion of seagrass, coastal wetlands restoration, inland freshwater wetlands restoration, kelp forest restoration, and seagrass restoration. And just to note, kelp forest restoration was added through feedback through the life of the project. And so it hasn't been fully included in the full kind of detailed feasibility assessment. Next slide, please. So the upper panel here is showing that protection and avoided conversion activities can have a much larger per acre carbon value, right? Because we're protecting that carbon that's already stored in these wetland soils and vegetation. In contrast, the lower panel is showing a smaller annual rate, right? But this is a rate that occurs over time. And the wide ranges here, they're important, right? They're representing or showing us that wetland carbon outcomes depend heavily on things such as hydrology, wetland type, vegetation type, and health, and those baseline conditions of existing wetlands. And so that means that site selection and restoration design can materially affect the results of an implementation or an implemented activity. So again, kind of a hyper-local dependent activity when you're trying to estimate those outcomes. Next slide, please. And so we're able to estimate 2 of the mitigation potentials for the state. Protection and avoided conversion of seagrass has a large potential of about 620,000 metric tons of CO2 per year, while the coastal wetlands restoration resulted in about 84,000 metric tons of CO2 per year. Next slide, please. And yes, I saw your comment, Chair, and agree. So protection and avoided conversion of wetlands and peatlands and coastal wetland restoration fall in that ready now quadrant. The other evaluated wetlands activities have varying tracking or longer term needs to kind of move them up in this ranking. The central improvement across these is really a more kind of consistent statewide system for wetland extent, condition, loss, restoration activities, and kind of where they're happening, as well as hydrology and kind of physical representation of wetland systems. And so additional Oregon-specific work on seagrass and other blue carbon systems could also reduce uncertainty in the carbon estimates and strengthen those community effect metrics for flood risk, water quality, and habitat outcomes. And so as mentioned previously, the Oregon Blue Carbon Calculator is a great example of existing tools that can really help connect these specific wetland actions to those estimated carbon outcomes and help address some of the methods and tracking needs highlighted here. We jump to the next slide. Oh, I think we went to, there we go.
Hey, Chris,
just again, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just giving you a time check. About 10 minutes remaining.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so similarly to our previous examples, we're trying to show kind of a high feasibility and a lower, more limited feasibility example. Protection and avoided conversion of seagrass scores lower, primarily due to kind of current adoption and implementation pathways. So there was, while there is evidence of specific state programs kind of implementing this activity, there weren't quite as many as kind of other practices within the wetlands category. And then there was also additional uncertainty in the greenhouse gas estimation methods and outcomes. And so just the adoption levels and the implementation pathways kind of reduce the overall feasibility for protection and avoided conversion. Let's jump to the next slide and speak to grasslands. Okay, so here we have 5 specific activities: protection and avoided conversion of grasslands and arid lands, optimized grazing strategies, reduce degradation of grasslands and arid lands, wildfire risk reduction on grasslands and arid lands, and then grassland and arid lands restorations. Next slide, please, and we'll look at the mitigation rates. Perfect. So the available literature provided carbon metrics for protection and avoided conversion of grasslands and arid lands, grassland and arid land restoration, and optimized grazing strategies. And the outcomes for these activities are really highly site-specific because of things like precipitation, soil type, soil quality, vegetation, baseline conditions, and then management history all matter for these practices. Protection and avoided conversion of grassland and arid lands is shown here on a separate graph because it represents the annual avoided loss of existing carbon stocks rather than a sequestration rate that's potentially gained from management or restoration. And so this rate is actually estimated based on the historical average annual loss rate of grasslands and arid lands within the state. Next slide, please. All right, so here as we start to expand and look at the total mitigation potential for protection and avoided conversion of grasslands, we estimate a little over 500,000 metric tons of CO2 per year. And then for grassland and arid lands restoration, we find over 4 million metric tons of CO2 per year potential. And again, actual outcomes kind of depend on where the restoration is occurring because this is site specific. Next slide, please. All right, so as we look at the grasslands, right, we see that none of the activities are currently falling in that ready now category. And the main limitation is less developed tracking systems and less consistent methods for linking implementation to carbon and community outcomes. And so this result, it doesn't mean that these activities lack value or can't be implemented, but it just reflects that there are some limitations on the kind of statewide data and methods that are currently available to quantify these outcomes. And so priority data needs include kind of soil carbon monitoring at different spatial scales, standardized grazing and land condition information, so that baseline level of conditions, and then better integration of rangeland systems into carbon modeling and reporting. Next slide, please. All right, so I just want to highlight kind of one area under the optimized grazing strategies. And so here it's scoring lower mainly because the outcomes depend heavily on baseline conditions. So what's the current grazing intensity? What's the current weather and climate patterns in that region? And what are those changes in management that the landowner is making? And so those uncertainties reduce the score for that greenhouse gas estimation methods, while outcome certainty is also somewhat reduced because of this. Next slide, please. I'm gonna let the dog out who's scratching at the door. Okay, croplands. So this is our last land category, and here we have, I believe it's nine or 10 activities. So we have nutrient management, composting, and that's applying compost to fields, optimized irrigation strategies, prescribed and rotational grazing, no-till or reduced tillage practices, cover crops, strip cropping, and alley cropping, implementing trees in croplands and buffers around croplands, avoided conversion, silvopasture, and then optimized poplar plantations. And so composting and optimized poplar plantations were both added throughout feedback, and so they weren't included in the full feasibility assessment. Next slide, please. And so the cropland carbon metrics, they reflect several different pathways here. So nutrient management can help reduce nitrous oxide emissions, no-till and reduced tillage, and cover crops, strip cropping, and alley cropping. They really drive changes in soil carbon and emissions from on-farm practices, while prescribed and rotational grazing and silvopasture affect pasture management and biomass on pasture. And then the trees and croplands and buffers are really focused on adding woody biomass to these land systems. And so the plots kind of reflect the varying pathways that these activities are impacting the land, with kind of substantial variation across studies. And so things like trees and croplands and buffers, has a high uncertainty in their greenhouse gas effects. Again, because it depends on kind of baseline existence of trees, the intensity to which trees are planted, and then also if you're implementing, kind of faster growing trees as opposed to those that take longer. And so there is a lot of kind of questions there in what the annual sequestration rate might be from that activity. Next slide, please. And so what we found when looking at the statewide estimates of mitigation, so we found that this trees and croplands and buffers is potentially the highest potentially has the highest rate of overall sequestration of about 4.5 million metric tons of CO2 per CO2e per year. Cover cropping, strip cropping, and alley cropping is about 717,000 acres or 1,000 tons. Silvopasture is a similar rate of about 708,000 tons, and then nutrient management is a little under 500,000 metric tons, and no-till and reduced tillage is about 150,000 metric tons.
Chris, just to clarify, your area estimate applied, is that per year?
That's a great question. It is not per year. This would be total, kind of cumulative area that's available. And then assuming that all of this is implemented tomorrow, right, is kind of how we're getting that climate mitigation potential and that annual mitigation rate.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Next slide, please. And so as we're looking at the feasibility, so no-till and reduced tillage, nutrient management, and cover crops, strip cropping, and alley cropping, they're all falling in that ready now quadrant. Silvopasture, prescribed and rotational grazing, avoided conversion of cropland, optimized irrigation strategies, and trees and croplands and buffers, they have additional tracking or longer term needs. And the key need here really is improvements in thinking about kind of multi-practice modeling. So that's a big one with the ag sector, right? Because there is the ability to implement multiple of these on the same acre of land. There's also the importance of knowing what the baseline is. What is the current practice that farmers are using on their land type, so we can start to estimate that delta when they're changing the practices. And then continued and expanded kind of soil carbon measurements is helpful in kind of reducing that uncertainty and the impacts of these activities. Next slide, please. And so finally, we'll look at two of the activities specifically. And while trees and croplands and buffers showed that greatest or the highest mitigation potential, right, there's still some uncertainty tied to that. One of the big drivers here is kind of current statewide adoption and spatial data that are more limited. And that would help, that information would help define and lessen the uncertainty when it comes to where is this occurring, what trees are being planted on lands, and kind of what are the what is the intensity of those trees being planted. We can jump to our next slide because I know I'm running over. And so then we come back to kind of our full feasibility assessment. And so, Chair, this is getting to your question, but as we're looking at this, we don't see any practices in the implementation gap category or quadrant. And this reason really is that the activities with mature tracking and quantification methods right, they generally also have those established implementation pathways and evidence of current adoption. And so where implementation pathways are less developed, the data and methods also tend to be less developed. And so placing those activities toward the lower left. And so this is a pattern in the available evidence and not necessarily a claim that implementation barriers do exist. All right, next slide. And so taking a larger look and thinking across our different land categories. So we have 9 practices that fit in this Ready Now category, concentrated in forest, wetlands, developed land, and cropland. And what's driving this, kind of what's consistent across these activities, not only are they already familiar with agencies and land managers, but they're also supported by existing implementation programs and can be tracked using relatively clear measures, such as acres treated, restored, protected, or enrolled. These activities also tend to have more established methods for translating those activities into greenhouse gas activities or greenhouse gas outcomes. And you'll notice that there's no grassland and arid land profiles in the Ready Now category. And this is largely because of the need for spatially resolute statewide activity data to measure these outcomes. As well as broadly in the science, the estimation methods for grasslands and arid lands is a little less defined than some of these kind of more active working lands. And again, Ready Now, this is still kind of a comparative assessment, and it doesn't mean that an activity that's not here is not appropriate or not feasible to be considering. Next slide. All right, so the remaining activities, right, they fall into either having a tracking gap and or kind of longer term data needs. And what generally is setting these apart, it's not a lack of activity on the ground, but less consistent data and less developed methods for estimating those outcomes. Many are highly site specific. They might depend on baseline conditions or baseline management practices, or they might require kind of longer term monitoring periods before the effect can be quantified reliably. And so this category, it just shows that there's that stronger reporting systems and analytical methods would help improve readiness. And it's not a judgment, again, on the activity itself or its feasibility. It's overall kind of applicability for the state. Next slide. And so thinking through this and thinking about what could come next and kind of future work to help improve implementation and tracking of NCS, I think there's ways to include kind of more realistic implementation rates, as well as looking at carbon changes over time a little more carefully. It's important to think about the interactions among activities if you are kind of co-implementing practices. And then separate economic and cost benefit analysis would help, provide that missing piece of cost effectiveness. And so these would just kind of help move the analysis beyond this kind of screening level feasibility assessment and more toward like a detailed scenario analysis. So with that, I will stop and hand it back to Liz to wrap us up.
Great. Thank you, Chris. That's wonderful. Commissioners, as you can see, there's so much information here and so much data that the team has worked to gather and that we're still pouring through. It's very excited that this information is finally coming together. Next slide, please. Before we end, I wanted to simply share a summary slide of the potentials, and it's hopefully helpful for your upcoming discussion about goal setting. A caution too, when you're looking at the slide, remember that mitigation potential for each NCS cannot simply be summed, right? So that's important to remember while you're gazing at this, and they must be modeled in order to ensure that NCS that are not complementary, or meaning that, you can't put every NCS in all the same places. You must choose and make decisions. So and that, of course, if we did that, would result in an overestimation. And so try not to sum when you're looking at this as a list. And of course, I had some takeaways for this slide, except I think that we're getting behind time. So I'll just close with before I hand it back to the chair that as the commission sets the goal, that's next, and we continue to refine our information about the activities that we can to achieve it. I think what this data and information supports is that a holistic approach to NCS implementation is necessary, like not only to realize the carbon benefit, but to achieve the statutory directive to increase resilience of ecosystems and community wellness. And that is a part of the work that we did not present on today. And as noted in your discussions and from the public and in comments on the goals report, there's much to figure out still, and we recognize that. But we're well on our way, in part because of this project, and we'll continue to seek clarity. It's what our job is seeking that clarity. But we hope that wouldn't, preclude the state from taking voluntary collective action, which was the spirit behind the legislation. So a formal draft will be ready in a couple of months or a month. We're still working with the agencies on all this information, their programs, the metrics, and refining the feasibility assessment. And we expect the draft to be published in late August or early September. So, and we'll conduct a public webinar at that time as well on the full breadth of this work. So, Chair, I'm handing it back to you. And there was a question from Commissioner Steckler, and I see Commissioner Lem's hand up too. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you and great work. And I think while we recognize that we can't add all this up, it does suggest that there are a lot of practices and a lot of potential in Oregon's natural moleculars. I think we can take away that. So that's good news. Commissioner Steckler, did you still want to raise your question?
Yeah, and I believe probably looking at the methodology in the report when it's available will be very helpful for me, because I do have a number of questions. And first, it was just kind of a comparison, and I think not all of the slides compare the same NCS activities, and so but the wetlands I think did. And I was just wondering how, and I was really looking at those slides 42 and what was it, 42 and 44. And if you could just talk a little bit about how the number 14 that has over 618 or has 618 metric tons of carbon, how you've determined that is like a number 5 on the, if you could explain those, that would be great. And I know that there's different, it's applied to a different number of acres as well, which actually just kind of added to my confusion. The math didn't seem to add up.
Yeah, that is a great question. I am looking. Yeah, so I think one of the pieces that I have to think about and kind of remember when looking at these, so like looking at slide 41, where we're showing those mitigation rates, right? So our reduced seagrass and seagrass protection, right? This is showing kind of a total per acre, not an annual rate. So it's a slightly different measure than what's being shown for the figures below. And so that piece, right, kind of helps, or that is then carried through when estimating those median climate mitigation potentials. But I do see what you mean. So I want to take a look back kind of at our detailed explanation, and I can follow up with you on this one offline, Becky, because that is a great, that's a great question.
Okay, great.
I have a few questions about the diagrams as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Could I ask one more question? On this slide in particular, I'm assuming this median climate mitigation potential is like the gross and not the net. So this, and what I'm trying to understand is this is not additive in that the potential is, the lands that currently, like, on the very first one, forest conservation protection and reduced deforestation, I'm assuming that they are, sequestering carbon at some rate currently. So is the number that you're showing here like the potential for it total, and it doesn't net out the existing to say this is in addition, it's almost another 4 million metric tons in addition to what is currently happening. But instead this is the total capacity of those number of acres to mitigate if it was if we actually conserved, protected, and reduced deforestation. Am I understanding that correct?
I'll start and then Chris, you can pipe in, but yes, generally, especially for where you see the words conservation protection, that is kind of like the measure of that mitigation of that stock of like what is happening on that landscape. It's not necessarily an additive capacity to, you know, sequester additionally each year. So we were just speaking yesterday about this with the project team and how we can better communicate that in our draft and final results, like trying to carve out those two distinct measures. Chris, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, that's well, yes, that's right, Liz. But and so, yeah, I think the example with number 2 with the reduced deforestation, that's correct. But then looking at like some of the cropland based activities, so thinking about no-till and reduced tillage, this number, this 156,000 metric tons, would be in addition to current applications of no-till or conservation tillage. So it is kind of activity specific.
It would be great to just understand that, like in the report itself. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Lem.
Oh, thank you. Let me unraise my hand. So I have a question more for staff, for Elizabeth, and also for other staff of other agencies presenting to the commission. You know, this is my first year on the commission, so it's been taking me a while to like, you know, understand sort of how these meetings go. This is very impressive work, and it's clear that a lot of work has gone into it. The point I want to make and ask is more general. I actually would like to suggest and ask that in the presentations, there be some slide about process, and in particular, sort of internal agency process for the work, and also if there's any information about peer review. Peer review, I think, is the right question because the commission is actually made up of many different people. And some people have a technical background. Some people are on the commission for lots of different reasons. We represent sectors, or we have, you know, different people. So I think saying, like, being able to say, oh, this went through, you know, agency review process with these offices and these experts, being able to say something about if there is any external peer review, those things can lend to the credibility and to the process, and also recognizing that this is draft. We've also just have the time limit, you know, we can't go into all these details. So I'm actually making this suggestion, having given this some thought in reflection to many other presentations the commission has seen, but I'll just let that suggestion and question lie and ask Elizabeth if you could just say something as if you were making up that slide now about process and if there's any peer review and so forth.
Yeah, I'll offer, and I did go over it very quickly at the beginning, but that we do, we're working with point of contact staff at each agency, particularly relative to the programs and metrics work, on make ground truthing our information there. You know, we've met several times this spring, and more often than not, and Jason and I are in the project team are emailing or discussing one-on-one, or, you know, just communicating with them in a constant kind of basis. Also trying to recognize that they're very busy, and this project is adding additional workload to their current work. We don't have an external peer review process for this project, and you know, perhaps Alan Zelenka, if you're on, I don't know normal processes for Odo based on external peer review. And I think it's a great suggestion, Commissioner. I actually just like, there's so much information pouring in the climate action realm, and we need to move quickly while also making sure what we're talking about is accurate. So I think we should take it under advisement. But that's the best answer I can give right now.
I like that suggestion as well. And, you know, the Oregon is part of the, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm blanking.
US Climate Alliance.
The Climate Alliance, thank you. So that's a great venue to potentially be doing peer review because other states are grappling with some of the same questions. So I think, you know, if not that whole group, you know, selecting a few of our, especially our neighbors, would probably be super helpful.
Couple of
Great
comments.
suggestion. We should be thinking about this on all of our products.
Couple of comments. When we do have the internal interagency work group that's been working with us on all this stuff on the climate team. We also have the NCS committee, which has made up of external people that has reviewed some of this stuff as well. And the second point would be Commissioner Lem, that we purposely didn't include the process description in this presentation because we wanted to focus on findings because it's more relevant to the goals discussion you're about to have. And so we were purposely light on the process description, but rest assured there is an enormous amount of information about the process in the report and the appendices where we're showing the work. I think this report's going to set the record at Odo for number of appendices all the way through P. And so if you want to do a deep dive into all of this, including the scoring on how the radar diagrams get done, everything will be in the appendices if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty details and deep dive into that stuff. But having said that, there is a section on process that goes into all of the things that we've done in order to develop this work. And then third point is that we have yet to put this out for public comment. So when we put this out for public comment, we typically do put this out and make sure that peers are on the list of people to help read that. But it's a good point that we'll make an extra special effort to reach out to folks that we think should be in that peer review group and make sure that they see it and hopefully they can respond to it as well.
Thank you.
Great point, Commissioner Lynn. Thank you. Are there other Commissioner Steckler?
Great, thank you. Was there a reason that you didn't, like I'm just looking at the cropland examples and there's the complete list, or there's a list of the natural climate solutions, and then there's a not all of those are included in the net mitigation rates graphic. And then even a smaller number is on the potential estimates. I'm just trying to like compare between different slides, and it's different, and not all of them have the ID number. So I'm like, is it really the same thing? Is there a reason it's different?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the short answer. Is that there's either an area extent that we didn't feel confident and we couldn't estimate in order to produce a quantified estimate, or we didn't have a GHG rate. But we had the area and we couldn't, so we couldn't, you know, quantify and come up with an estimate. So we do have that marked and we did mention it at the beginning of the presentation. So 22 of the 33 NCS, we were able to have GHG rates for. 15 of those 22, we were able to have an area estimate for. And so you kind of get to this suite of NCS that we're able to estimate a potential for right now. And that may change too, of course, and also during public comment as more information comes in. If they're like, oh, wait, no, here's a good area, or here's a GHG rate you missed. So I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, we're over time, so I will withhold a few questions I have and follow up with you afterwards.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
you,
great
everyone.
Job. It is an impressive body of work, and it's, you know, on top of 2 other impressive bodies of work that staff have been managing this year. So really, maybe 3 impressive bodies of work. So thank you all for that. And I think next we go to public comment. And I know we have, I think, 5 people that have been identified. If anybody else wants to provide public comment, please raise your hand so you can be recognized after we do the first 5. And Megan Kemple is, I think, on deck.
Great. Hello.
Welcome.
I'm Megan Kemple with Oregon Climate and Agriculture Network. I serve on the Oregon Climate Action Commission's Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee. Regarding the NCS metrics that we just heard about, we are really interested in these metrics because they track our progress with implementation of practices on the ground, as well as effects on communities. And as Liz mentioned in her slide about partners, ORCAN has a statewide soil health network, and we're collecting data from partners that could align well with the metrics. And we're looking forward to partnering with ODO to align and share our data from the agricultural community to support the effort. Regarding the Natural Working Lands net carbon sequestration and storage goal that you're about to discuss, we recommend that the Commission adopt option 3, which is grounded in the best available science and more accurately reflects the sequestration potential on Oregon's natural working lands. While it's voluntary, we believe that setting an ambitious goal demonstrates strong state leadership in support of climate action and investments in our natural working lands. And regarding the optional policy capacity and analysis goals, we agree that the state should include additional goals that address capacity building, but we think they need to be focused on action rather than time-consuming and resource-intensive modeling and studies. We think we're ready to move forward with investments and other policy solutions to move the state toward its goals, and now is a great time to commit to doing the work. And additionally, we urge the state to stay close to the definition of natural climate solutions in statute, which is an activity that enhances or protects net biological carbon sequestration on natural working lands while maintaining or increasing ecosystem resilience and human well-being. So that we're focusing, and we think that's important to stay close to the definition so that we're focusing on improving practices and providing the support that Oregonians need to make these changes. Thank you for your consideration of my comments.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you for all the leadership you've shown in this area of work.
Thank you.
Okay, I think next up, David Drexler was also on the advisory committee.
Good morning. My
Good
name
morning.
is David. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. My name is David Mildrexler, and I'm an ecologist that studies forest ecosystems, focusing on water, climate, and biodiversity. I work for Partnership for Policy Integrity as the U.S. Director of Science and Policy, and also serve on the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee, which has been a terrific experience. And just like the commission, we have people from different backgrounds representing different interests, but I think I've just always got the feeling that everyone agrees that we want to see meaningful steps to address the climate crisis, and that's been really encouraging to me. I just wanted to take a moment to emphasize in my comment that, you know, time is a really critical variable that because climate change is cumulative, and I think that's a really tricky variable that can for the public to understand at times. You know, the temperatures that we're seeing today are due to the buildup of greenhouse gases over the last 150 years. And also because of this dynamic, actions that we take now are more important than actions taken in the future because of this time lag effect. So I've thought a lot about this with the different goals, and also just wanted to highlight a couple of key findings from our research on forests in Oregon that relate to this important time variable. One of the things that we've found is that large diameter trees store a huge amount of above ground carbon relative to their abundance in the forest. So we looked at 6 national forests in Eastern Oregon, and every FIA data plot across those forests was used in this study. And we found that just 3% of the largest trees that are 21 inches diameter and larger hold 42% of the total above ground carbon stock. And if you consider that it takes many decades to centuries for large trees to accumulate these carbon stocks from the atmosphere, you can start to appreciate why protecting mature and old forests with large trees is very important for climate mitigation. We don't have time to regain these carbon stocks in the critical window of time for action. And large trees also continue to accumulate carbon from the atmosphere, which makes them even more important. So some of the synergies with protecting large trees in forests include that they are among the most fire-resistant trees in the forest. I think that's a really important point for right now. They also provide very valuable wildlife habitat and play a very unique role in water cycles. So the importance of time, coupled with the increased climatic stress that our ecosystems are already experiencing, I think urges for placing important efforts on protecting stocks right out of the gate. And as a scientist, I know that Oregon's climate and the global climate are entirely interconnected. So I would also urge for alternative 3, since it considers our role in the entire climate system, and just encourage the commission to think carefully about that first 10-year period and making really important decisions about protecting carbon stocks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And David, you mentioned an analysis that your organization did. Is that if there's a link to the analysis, please put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think next up is Linda Bernoulli. I don't know if I said your last name right or not. Linda?
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm a resident of Portland and a member of Pack Clean. That's a group of professionals along the West Coast studying greenhouse gas removal methods, what's going to be effective and cost effective as well. And I appreciate the great presentation that you had on sequestration through lands and wetlands, but I want to venture to say that's not going to be sufficient for us to get reach a healthy climate within our kids' lifetime, which I'm sure we'd love to do. So just to give a few numbers, since 2018, the IPCC has stated that achieving net zero by 2050 will require large-scale greenhouse gas removal on the order of 10 gigatons per year. And that was stated by the world's leading climate scientists 8 years ago. And it's become more clear in the recent years that we need large-scale greenhouse gas removal. So we need to develop and research these greenhouse gas removal capabilities and capacity. So we would say that no climate action plan can be considered credible if it ignores greenhouse gas removal. And our neighbors to the north and south, Washington and California, are on their way to integrating greenhouse gas removal in their climate action plans. So we would urge the Oregon Climate Action Commission to schedule a meeting in the near future, and we would have many resources since we study this topic. To have a central topic of the agenda, and then to update the climate action plan to include targets for growing greenhouse gas removal capacity in parallel with reducing emissions. So Oregon has the best chance of achieving a net negative emissions before 2050 by including greenhouse gas removal. In Oregon plans, local organizations and universities can be empowered to research the most cost-effective methods of greenhouse gas removal. And the state could support bills at the federal level that support this research, such as the Rescue Oceans Act, a bipartisan bill sponsored by Representative Suzanne Bonamici that will research marine carbon dioxide removal, which can be the most cost-effective ways to mimic nature in removing large-scale greenhouse gas removal. So that's those are my comments. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Linda. And we have had it on our agenda to talk about a broader set of greenhouse gas removal strategies. So appreciate your offer of providing some information on that. And also just note that in our roadmap to 2030, we included a goal of net negative as part of our what we recommended the state consider in terms of greenhouse gas goals. So we are on record of encouraging net negative, and would love to have broader conversations about how to do that through different avenues. And I think up next is Lauren Link from the Nature Conservancy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McDonald and members of the commission. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today on the non-binding carbon sequestration goal for Oregon's natural and working lands. For the record, my name is Lauren Link, and I'm the Climate Program Director for the Nature Conservancy here in Oregon. The Nature Conservancy is a nonpartisan, science-based organization. We work with partners across the state to address both biodiversity loss and climate change. And I also serve on the Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee as the conservation representative and lead our Natural Climate Solutions Coalition, which is a group of organizations really focused on helping increase the pace and scale of natural climate solutions in Oregon. So I do want to thank Odo and the Commission for not only their thoughtful approach to updating this goal, but really for the team's work over the last year on the many deliverables that we've heard about today. TNC recommends that the Commission adopt option 3 because updating the current goal really reflects the best available science. It's informed by that land-based net carbon inventory that we've heard about. And while voluntary, we do believe that setting this strong goal signals strong state support of investments in our natural working lands and highlights the important role land management strategies play in climate action for our state. We also feel that the adoption of option 3 will further align the net carbon sequestration goals with the governor's priorities for climate resilience, as outlined in Executive Order 2526, and will build a compelling state strategy focused not only on carbon emissions, but also those economic, health, and ecological benefits that we heard about across Oregon's landscapes and communities. We do recognize the current limitations in data collection and reporting. And as a science-based organization, of course, we're always interested in additional analysis and research, but do agree with Megan's comments earlier. Considering the limited funding opportunities, we do recommend the Commission prioritize investments that focus on action and implementation. And I just want to touch on 3 areas we would really like to see prioritized. One is building agency capacity to build up that reporting structure. And that's across agencies. And we really encourage Odo and the Commission to work in collaboration with the interagency team that is working to implement that executive order to ensure consistency across those efforts. We were also pleased to see the call for additional investments to programs that implement NCS practices. So whether this is additional allocation to the existing Natural Working Lands Fund, whether it's exploring other funding streams such as the Oregon Environmental Restoration Fund, or the new funding through ODF&W with the 1.25% for wildlife, or even looking to adjust program and funding criteria for the 100+ state and local agency programs that were mentioned in that report that are currently implementing NCS practices, to really emphasize those benefits from those programs. And then finally, we recommend Odo and the Commission consider the breadth and diversity of strategies across sectors that the state has available to address climate change impacts, and to really think holistically on strategic approaches to reduce emissions, both through land management strategies such as NCS and through decarbonization initiatives as well. We really believe the Commission has a unique role and a key role in connecting the dots in all these conversations around land use, climate action, and decarbonization efforts, and to be able to facilitate those conversations about how we can meet both our state's climate goals and protect our natural and working lands. So we really encourage the Commission to be responsive and bold in the face of our changing climate, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate that. And I think we have one more speaker, Josephine. Josephine Keene. Did I get that right? Jeff? Oh, there we go. Josephine, or Josie, sorry. Welcome.
Josie, can you speak?
Looks like your mic is off.
One moment.
Oh, it was briefly back on.
Okay, try now, please.
Like it's still off.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, there you are.
Oh,
Welcome.
finally. Sorry. My name is Josie Kerner. I'm a member of the forestry team of an all-volunteer organization mobilizing climate action together. I'm also a forest owner. I wish to comment on the Oregon Climate Action Commission's June 15th presentation about natural climate solutions. The Natural and Working Lands Advisory Committee presented on the effects of implementing climate-smart forestry practices to reduce greenhouse gases emissions in order to help reach Oregon's climate goals. Climate-smart forestry activities include deferred timber harvest, riparian reforestation, and replanting after wildfires. The PSU report states these changes in forest management, especially longer harvest rotations, would contribute the most to nature-based greenhouse gas reductions, 76 to 94% of the overall annual reductions, followed by changes to agricultural management. Slide 17 of the Natural Working Lands Advisory Committee presentation appears to be misleading in its representation of the report and could lead the audience to a misinterpretation of climate-smart forestry practices. The slide shows both positive effects of climate-smart forestry practice as improved species richness and enhanced biodiversity, as well as negative effects such as reduced soil health and altered ecosystem integrity. We believe the inclusion of the negative effects misrepresents the findings of the PSU report regarding longer rotations, since the report showed these negative effects only when comparing any harvesting at all to versus allowing trees to continue growing, a different thing entirely. We would like to see this slide corrected to accurately reflect the positive effects from longer timber rotations and compared to short rotation cycles. I just wanted to say on this current day's presentation, it'd be helpful to have the legend of the numbers clearly identified on the side at all times. You know, the plots, you see the plots, but you don't remember what these numbers refer to. It'd be helpful to have that legend. And it was an excellent presentation, but I want to reiterate, you know, larger trees are the very easiest and best way to take carbon out of the atmosphere. It's such a simple solution and really beneficial. So I appreciate the commissioners for calling that out.
Thank you, Josie. And Josie, you were referring to a presentation that was made in front of the advisory committee.
Yes.
And then you referenced today's as
Yes.
well. So we'll go back and take a look at both
Okay.
and see what may need to be modified.
Okay, thanks so much for letting me talk. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Are there any others that have signed up to provide public comment?
Chair, not seeing anybody else signed up.
Okay. So do we have a break scheduled next, or are we?
No, I believe we're jumping right into the goals discussion.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So as we have discussed in earlier meetings, the commission and ODO were jointly directed to consult with other agencies to develop a recommended net sequestration and storage goal. And staff at ODO have been working with the commission's NCS committee and interagency working group and experts to develop this recommendation. Today, we're going to discuss and adopt a net sequestration goal for natural and working lands, and then consider additional policy priorities of things that we think should be recommended to help us provide the additional foundation for that. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, we can go back up one. Apologies. So in 2021, in 2020, Governor Brown directed us to develop a natural and working lands Natural Climate Solutions proposal. And at the time, we developed this proposal and adopted that in 2021. The commission adopted that in 2021. Next slide. So over the course of the last several
Sorry,
months.
but I'm not seeing slides. I'm not sure what's going on. It could be me, so don't let me interrupt you. But if there's something, if I'm
How
not the
are
only
other people
one,
doing seeing
I'm
slides? I can see.
just, I'm seeing the mitigation potential summary. Well, that's
okay.
the old slide.
My end.
Are you seeing proposed goal options? That's
No.
what should be up.
No.
I'm seeing proposed.
I see
goal.
that.
For those of you that are lagging behind, probably will catch up, or we might want to rejoin.
Is it rectified itself for any of you? 'Cause these are kind of important slides.
Yes.
What slide number are you on? It looks like I can do it myself.
65.
65. Okay, thank you.
Mine just popped up too. Thanks.
Jeff, did the chair just drop? Oh, wait, no, yes.
Looks like the chair might have dropped off the call.
Okay, how strange. What a strange meeting.
Nora, you're up.
I'm back. Apologies.
Oh,
Oh,
there we go. Welcome back.
saved by the bell.
So much for trying to move between different windows. So we did, but the staff reviewed the original 2021 proposal and option 2, which is proposed back to us, would modify the language, but basically keep the same ambition. But just given a little more context, kind of improving the language to make it more measurable over time. And then option 3 is to increase our ambition. And this is informed by a combination of some of the new data that we have for Oregon, but also some analysis that Liz and Jason did to kind of look globally at what and nationally at what we should be trying to achieve. So staff recommended option 2 and 3, and Odo recommends option 2 or 3. And so we can go into a conversation about which of these we want to consider. Before I go to asking for a motion, I just thought we should start by asking if there are any questions about the 2 options that people wanted to get clarification on. Oops.
Is everybody able to see the options now? We still.
Yes.
Commissioner Lem?
I just have one factual question. Does the advisory committee make a recommendation?
Not on this.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to add to that, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, overall, the advisory committee is in a feedback and guidance and stakeholder perspective role, and they don't provide recommendations on the NCS work directly.
But I think the report indicated ODOE recommends 2 or 3. Is that right?
That's correct. And with 2 being, same ambition, just better ability to kind of track how you would estimate that. And then that's in option 2, and then option 3 is a greater ambition.
It will add.
I'm curious, since given we're at 48, what's the what's the potential to achieve either goal 2 or 3 in the coming years?
Chair, would you like?
It's a major change in the trend that's been downward for, any number of reasons that we could analyze till the cows come home. But I guess my question is, what's the likelihood of getting to 53, A, and B, how important is 53 to the overall state goal that we're trying to achieve for carbon reduction?
Well, first, I think, if I may, Chair, can I answer? Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. Commissioner McNichol, thank you. The feasibility or the potential or how to get to the goals was a big topic of last meeting as well and during discussion. And so we brought the information that we have from the work we're doing right now to bear today, but we haven't been able to do that scenario modeling that like the Tigger analysis has done, right?
Right.
In relationship to the sector-based emissions reductions goal, right, this is meant to be additional to the work there. And, I think slide at the very beginning, it's the reason why we frame the natural climate solutions work in those categories of 2 major climate actions. So slide 6 really got to, that we need to do both things. And so we're not going to get there without doing both things, right? So we need to meet our sector-based emissions reduction goals, and we also really need to start thinking hard about how to take legacy emissions out of the atmosphere, because they will still be there even if emissions stop. So they're really complementary goals, and they work in tandem, which is why it's exciting we're talking about it today.
Right.
But I don't know if I can offer any more information at this time about kind of how we would get there.
Yeah, I think both are ambitious, and both, the next steps that we talked about in the NCS committee, the commission's NCS committee was, we wish we had a roadmap to know how we would get to either of these, but we don't. But we should be making, we can go ahead and make a decision on either one of these.
Well, I found it
come up with a roadmap.
in the I think it's the executive summary or whatever, this report that was sent, the 30-page report we got. And summarize the issue at hand. Oregon's goals: should we focus on global climate needs or the feasibility of potential action? So I didn't really quite understand that statement. So I don't know if someone wants to expand on that.
Yeah, I'll start and then turn it over to you, Liz. So I think we identified a number of criteria for what would be a good goal. And, one was science-based and one was kind of feasibility. And so I think the question that the staff were working to answer is kind of which of those do we want to weigh more? Among other criteria that we had identified, should we weigh in on the side of ambition or what we think might be more feasible? I think that's the difference between 2 and 3. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I'll add to that, right? The goal that the commission recommended in 2021 really did lean toward trying to figure out those baselines for specific activities. The baseline was supposed to be between four activities from 2010 to 2019. We're unable to do that at this time. We cannot provide a baseline for all the NCSs, all the natural climate solutions that might help us achieve the goal. Particularly, looking back, if we wanted to try and build from a time frame like that on specific activities, there's a lot of historic data missing, right? We have done a lot of activities on the landscape without that intense tracking. So we're going to have to figure out methodology in order to come up with those baselines. not having that information. And of course, the information we shared today with the current project also shows some of just the data gaps that we're facing, looking at trying to base, right, this goal on very like feasible government operations actions, right, at this moment, baselines. And so we looked to the land-based net carbon inventory to provide some of that feasibility. So this number overall, it still fits within the biophysical, abilities of the landscape. These numbers are still within, annual net sequestration that has happened in the past in Oregon. And that's what we can share at this present moment.
Yeah,
I'll just note,
the implication is that option 2 is not ambitious, and I'm not sure I agree with that.
Oh, it's ambitious.
Yeah. So that's, I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing to that too. Just to be clear about these goals, few, if any, goals that Oregon has established are based on complete information and a complete vision or roadmap to how to achieve them. That's true for almost all forward-looking goals. For example, our sector-based goals, we had no idea how to implement that and whether or not we could when we set them, when we thought we could, but we didn't have a plan. Now, the Tigger report shows, yes, we can come darn close to meeting our goals, depending on what happens with data centers, based on the things that we put in place after we set that goal. Right. So, and that's true for this goal as well. So it's based on what science tells us is needed to help solve the climate crisis. And most of the time when you set one of these forward-looking ambitious goals, it creates the impetus for creating that action plan that includes sufficient capacity and funding to achieve the goal over time. And so that's why we made recommendations in the report as well for the consideration of the commission that calls for additional funding and capacity to actually build that out, as we did with almost every other goal that's forward-looking in the state. So the context of how this fits with other goals is quite important.
Thank you.
And just a note on the Tigger project, we do show a gap in 2035 of, I want to say 3.5 billion metric tons and a gap in 2050 of 10 million metric tons.
Yeah.
So something on that order.
Yeah.
Commissioner Steckler.
Great, thank you so much. I guess if I'm understanding this correctly as well, and Liz had mentioned this, that even for option 3, looking at our net sequestration between 2000 and 2019, we were kind of within that range roughly of the 57 million metric tons and the 62.4. And it's really just been this last 5 years that we've seen that extremely precipitous drop because of some of those very large disturbances, wildfires and others. So I think all of this research and all of the science says that we really need to do what we can to stop the trend line and to actually reverse it. And so I guess I support that more aggressive of being back, if we can get back into that rough range of where we were between 2000 and 2020, that seems to be a very kind of positive direction to be both going and to strive for.
I will say it hasn't really just been the last 5 years. There's been kind of a longer term decline, but certainly impacted by wildfire as a major source of some of the loss. But it's been
the trend exists even if you remove those big disturbances. I mean, it's still a pretty serious trend.
Yeah, that's an important point. The decline in sequestration total amount has declined over the last 10 plus years, regardless of wildfires, for instance.
Yeah. Commissioner
Lem. Thank you again. And I mean, before I ask my question, I'll just say, I think in principle, as a member of the commission, I would support an ambitious goal. And I mean, I think even without completely having all the data or understanding, I recognize the importance of this. I'm just trying to understand again, sort of like where the difference came between option 2 and option 3. And if I could ask the question this way, what are the other states doing, or what are the other goals, or what are the other countries doing? Is this comparable to where our peers or other, or are we ahead? Are we the first one? You know, that's the question I have.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that question. We are ahead. I think California has a goal, but they framed their goal in protecting stocks and looking back to a specific year, 2014, to reach back to. So they too are looking to their previous biophysical abilities on the landscape in order to manage, make management decisions right now. A lot of states are actually using their conservation goals for kind of a surrogate for trying to nail a carbon value. So a lot of not a lot, a handful to a dozen other states had decided to join the 30 by 30 biodiversity global initiative that had come out in 2020 and during the last federal administration. And so states were like, yes, let's join 30 by 30. And they're really kind of using that conservation goal to say like, and this is going to help our natural and working lands, and they're just kind of tracking that in their inventory over time, in their statewide inventory over time, but without actually setting themselves an explicit goal. So we are trying to achieve something that's new and cutting edge, and that could provide Oregon even more direction, more explicit direction about what we mean to achieve by setting this goal.
A number of other states do kind of acres of reforestation, for example, that they want to invest in. Yeah.
Acres of protection, acres of reforestation, acres of restoration. Yeah.
And Liz, maybe you want to describe the EO 25-26 and some of the work there that's related to this and the 10 by 10 and things like that.
That's a very good idea. Thanks, Alan. So we're really excited, of course, about EO 25-26. It kind of puts a conservation target in place that is very complementary to your decision making here today. So that EO calls for 10% of lands to be conserved, restored, protected over the next 10 years in Oregon. The group working on that hasn't exactly figured out what that means at this moment, but they are working. The agencies involved are working on those particular actions and targets, like what that would mean to them for the next 10 years. And so we imagine that that coordination structure is just going to work very complementary with also this continued investment or this target that speaks to a carbon value.
Yeah, another good example of setting an ambitious goal and then figuring out how to meet it.
True.
Good point. And some of the policy recommendations that we'll take up next after we vote on this are, I think some of those would help support that implementation and tracking of that executive order as well. So good to be in sync on that. Any other clarifying questions? If not, I will go to ask for a motion. Okay. So with that, would someone like to propose a motion? We've got language listed out here. We can go for option 2 or option 3. And welcome a motion.
I assume that non-voting members can also not make motions.
I assume so.
Correct.
That's a great question.
That's correct.
If you want to make a comment before we go into
I would
motions.
love to. Thank you. This is a common question with entities thinking about climate and climate goals. And there's often this concern for setting high goals and then be embarrassed by not achieving those goals, as opposed to setting mediocre goals and achieving those goals, although achieving less than you would have had you failed to reach your higher goal. I think the most important thing is that we sequester as much carbon in this particular conversation. We sequester as much carbon as we possibly can, regardless of the goals. So I would strongly advocate for the higher, stronger goal. And I would second the thought that's been raised by a number of people, including the public, that we focus primarily on action and beginning to actually reduce carbon as opposed to further studies to make sure that we are very accurately portraying the needs. There is no amount of overshoot possible here in the sequestration of carbon. We can't possibly do too much. So my very strong request and advocacy would be towards the highest possible goal and as immediate action as we can possibly attain. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Campbell. Okay, so back to entertaining a motion. Who would like to propose a motion?
Yeah, I will move adoption of option 3.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Do I have a second? Okay, thank you. Do we have any further discussion?
Who is the second?
Becky.
Commissioner Steckler.
Thank you, Commissioner Steckler.
Do we have any additional discussion of the motion, which is to propose option 3, which would increase our sequestration to 57.6 and 62.4 in years 35 and 50. Commissioner Apter? Oh, sorry, Vice Chair. Sorry, I'm still getting used to that.
Oh, how dare you, Chair? Thank you. I just want to echo what we just heard from Rep. Gamba and just this discussion throughout, and just emphasize, I think this commission has an important responsibility to lead by example when it comes to uplifting and relying on the best available science and data. And I think that the report does a really good job in the conversation today as emphasized this is that option 3 is based on new data sources, the IPCC, other analysis and new data and inventory, and the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory. And that is, I think, a very important part of this commission's charge. So appreciate this conversation. I am looking forward to moving to the vote and supporting this motion.
Discussion before we go to the vote. Okay, I'm going to go down the list as you all joined the meeting. Commissioner Sievers.
I vote nay.
Commissioner Lem.
I vote in support of the motion.
Okay. Commissioner Steckler.
I vote in support of the motion.
Okay. Vice Chair Apter.
Aye.
Commissioner Dotson.
I think I'm done voting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner McNichol. Commissioner McNichol.
Aye. I was muted. Sorry.
Commissioner Thorndike.
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Vasuchinsky.
I believe I'm voting.
Oh, sorry. Goodness. Giving all sorts of power up here. Commissioner Sievers, do you want to explain your nay vote? You don't have to, but I just want to give you that option.
Yeah, I was just based on the negative trend and the amount of input and resources to turn the trend and then regain ground. I was seeing that as a very ambitious goal. And then as I went through the decision matrix, they're both science-based, understandable, measurable. Maybe they're both not measurable at this point. The ambitiousness, I just weighed the ambitiousness versus the yet achievable, maybe on the achievable portion. And then part of it is that I was worried that the numbers shown as achieving on this side would reduce the severity or our energy to the reduction on the other side. So I didn't want it to look like the numbers were coming down. Maybe we should achieve it someplace else, I guess.
Those are all really important thoughts for us to be considering. And to your last point, when we adopted the goal in 2021, we made it clear that it needed to be in addition to and not, replacing our ambition on our sector-based and consumption goals. So appreciate your points. I think it's something that we will want to keep in, all those points are things that we'll want to keep in mind. But it looks like we have the votes to support option 3. And then I think, as we are directed, we will be updating our goal as additional information comes in. We can modify it. So thank you. We can move to the next slide, I think. So since we met last time, we added a few additional recommendations or goals. I think the foundational ones, having a cross-agency reporting infrastructure, doing some modeling to be a little more clear about where to best invest, looking at the current incentives that are available to landowners to advance natural climate solutions. And then I think we added wanting to secure additional funds for the Natural and Working Lands Fund, as we have not gotten additional funding since 2003, and conducting a land-based stock assessment. So those are the 5 policy recommendations that we can discuss. We've heard some conversations about not wanting to hold our actions up while we're getting these additional studies done and tracking systems done, but at the same time, some of this I think will be important to us being able to make good decisions on how we allocate funds. So just love to hear some additional conversations before we go to a motion on kind of the pros and cons of adopting these recommendations. Any or all of them. Commissioner Lewis, or Commissioner Lamb, sorry.
I think this is I'm getting a clear picture for this. So I would just like to say I do support that what we're doing here and the importance of setting an ambitious goal and also trying to increase our capacity building at the same time, and including asking for the needed resources for us to be able to move forward in this area. I'd just like to ask if the commission can receive, if there's a plan for the commission to get updates over a period of time as this goes forward, if that's already part of this, or maybe just to clarify that. Thank you.
Absolutely, Commissioner Lamb. Yes, as we are directed, we are supposed to be updating our goals as we get new information, and a number of these actions and recommendations would result in new information. So we want to, I think, assess what should be included in our biennial report to the legislature this fall, and then maintain kind of updated information that may cause us to update our goals as well.
Yeah, I was going
Commissioner McNichol.
Chair, that I was going to add that there are multiple places, Commissioner Lem, where we'll be doing that on a regular basis. Odo, the report to the legislature is a great place to do that, but also on a regular basis, all the things that have come up in the past get updates as we move forward, so that the commission can be abreast of the newest and latest and status of all the things that you've done in the past.
Commissioner McNichol.
I have two things. First, item 3 on incentives. This sort of dovetails interestingly with the potential for cap and trade, and how those funds are used, and because there is a market to buy sequestration that's could be quite interesting and maybe helpful in Oregon, that I've seen done on a number of conservation projects. The other comment is that, you know, like many things, this thing says that the state of Oregon will do these things. My preference would be to assign some responsibility for each one of these items, which I think 1, 2, 3, and 5 are Odo leads, if I read that right. And then number 4 is obviously getting the legislature to provide the funding for the fund. So I like to put some accountability in there rather than making these general statements about. I'm never sure really who the state of Oregon is, right? So that would be my
Fair
comment.
enough.
The very good point, Commissioner. The next step, of course, if the commission chooses to adopt these proposed policy capacity analysis goals or recommendations, is to come up with an action plan about how they would be implemented, and we bring that back to the commission and keeping updated on how that's progressing.
Okay, I like all 5 of them myself.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, thank you. I really just wanted to emphasize number 4. I think just thinking back on what we've heard today, actions that are focused on breaking ground and making concrete changes. And obviously that is not possible without funding. And so really emphasizing the need that yes, the information gathered from reports and modeling is so important and informative, but having actual funds and the actual ability to have these projects break ground, I think, is very important. So I would definitely emphasize that in the goals that we're taking along.
Thank you, Commissioner Dotson.
Thank you. I mean, I think all these look like they make sense to me. The one thing, and maybe this is a conversation that's better deferred to the action plan that Alan mentioned, but you know, I just, with all due respect to our contractors, I'd hate for all this effort to just really be we're spending resources on contractors for additional work. You know, I'd like to see the resources that we do develop capacity within our own agencies to provide incentives that are actually used by Oregonians to accomplish things. And I just think that's an important thing to continue to remember as we move forward on this stuff.
Completely support you in that notion. So appreciate that. I'm glad you brought that up. Are there other comments before I entertain another motion?
Just one comment on Commissioner Dotson's comment, which was when in the goals report that we sent out, that's the underlying premise of all of these, that these are intended to build capacity and they're intended to build funding so that we can get this work done. And over time. So, and so it doesn't just all fall on Liz and Jason to do it all. We will hire some contractors to do some of it, but yes, that's the intent. And then number 4, there are 4 agencies that have that are applicable, that use the Natural Working Lands funds. So there are different agencies that are involved in this as well.
And I was at one of the agency director and chair meetings this year. A couple of the agencies, I think Department of Agriculture and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, both mentioned to me that the work that they did together to come up with a collective proposal was just a great experience for them in terms of that collaboration and really thinking kind of above and beyond each agency's mission, which was great to hear. Okay, I'm going to propose we go to the next slide, which I think is a motion slide, and would entertain a motion.
Yeah, so moved.
Can I have a second?
I'll second it. It's Carter. And Commissioner McNichol, I guess is my name.
Okay, thank you so much. So you are moving that we advance all 5 of these recommendations. Is that correct?
Correct. And again, with the understanding that, and I think as Commissioner Dotson pointed out, a lot of the action plan side is more relevant. I mean, you know, in terms of incentives and the other agencies' roles, which I think are very important, actually. And then also perhaps in terms of encouraging, you know, private, leveraging private folks, like for instance, land conservancies and the like, and everything, to be able to meet some of those goals. So to not have it all necessarily just be agency directed, but you know, the larger concept of incentives.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So if you will all permit us, we might do a little bit of modifying to this language to indicate where there might be opportunities or more specific action taken by different agencies, and we can bring that back to you at our next meeting. But with that, we've got a motion and it's been seconded. Any other discussion? Okay. Oh, whoops, I just lost you guys. There we go. Then I will go ahead and run down our list of voting members. Commissioner Sievers.
I vote in favor of the motion.
Commissioner Lamb.
I'm happy to vote in support of this motion.
Great. Commissioner Steckler.
I vote in favor of the motion.
Vice Chair Apter.
I support.
Commissioner McNichol. Suppose
Aye.
because you seconded. Okay. Commissioner Thorndike.
Yeah, I guess I have to vote. Yes. I have to vote. Yes.
And Commissioner Garcia.
I vote in support.
Excellent. Thank you all. And we will come back with a little more specific action plan at one of our next meetings. So thank you. With that, I think we will take a break and then come back and kind of do follow up on the work that's going into developing recommendations for our biennial report. Is that right, Jeff? Is that where we are?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. See you in 5 minutes. So at about 11:41.
41.
Sorry, if people could turn on your videos just so I can track who's back. And I want to welcome Representative Marsh, who's joining us today for our last agenda item. Thank you. And Representative Marsh, do you still have a fairly free time for the next half an hour or so? It's like folks are gathering again. Why don't we take on our last agenda item? As we have been discussing, we are responsible for providing a biennial report to the legislature, and it is due December 1st, and it is needs to include progress towards addressing our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. Getting some background noise, so. And then identifying recommendations that we hope the legislature will consider. Representative Marsh, thank you for joining us today. And if you are fairly flexible for the next half hour, I'll maybe pause having you present to us for just a few more slides.
Sure, I have till noon.
Okay. Okay, well then we might go there a little bit early, but we'll why don't you go
Sure.
to the next slide? Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
We might want to switch the order then and maybe jump into
Yeah.
the discussion with Rep. Marsh.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and jump forward. So in our last meeting, we identified 4 committees. One, which we described as the report committee, which was going to kind of synthesize everything and also take on some cross-cutting issues. And Vice Chair Apter raised the concern that, at least in our discussion at our last meeting, we did not have a committee focused on the built environment. And rightly so, the Vice Chair identified the fact that we have a lot of existing programs and we have a number of recommended gap measures that focused on the built environment. So as we consider that, we propose to have that be one of the main topics that the report or synthesis committee is going to take on. And I wanted to welcome Representative Marsh, who has established a work group that's focused on home cooling, and give you an opportunity to kind of talk about some of the issues that you're hoping your work group will address that we could consider as part of our recommendations as well. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm a little awkward because I had to drive home between Medford and Ashland, and it looked like I was I pulled over and a car was honking at me. I think I was in their parking space, so I had to move.
Oh,
but
no.
I think I'm good now.
Okay, good.
Coming to you from Southern Oregon, where it is actually pretty unpleasant, and maybe Dan has shared this already. We have air quality well above 150, which would be safe, relatively safe. And of course, those of us who are in the middle of the smoke aren't the people who are really suffering. It is our neighbors to the north of us in Jackson County, where the fire has been raging for about a week. Just another reminder that we sit here in the middle of the ongoing impacts of climate change. So thank you, Catherine, so much for inviting me. I can make a fairly brief report. You all, I know everybody on this call is well aware that it's been 5 years since the heat dome that affected Oregon in the July and August of 2021. In my case, we've been in the legislature. We passed 2021 to set 100% goals for electricity. We passed a lot of legislation around responding to the wildfires of 2020. And we came home and immediately we were cast into another crisis when we read and learned that more than 100 Oregonians had died in the middle of that heat dome. Probably many more, because there are many individuals with chronic illnesses that were exacerbated during the heat dome. So we went into action immediately. In the following session, we passed legislation that gave tenants a right to install air conditioners. We set up an air conditioner installation program. And most importantly, from my perspective, we set up heat pump programs that provided incentives for individuals who wanted to install heat domes. Or my all-time favorite program, we set up the renter heat pump program that gives landlords significant incentives to install heat pumps in rental units, especially when the renters are at a fairly low income. So those programs have been in effect. They are terrific programs, but they've largely run out of money, and we haven't had the ability to reinvigorate them with additional funding. And in the meantime, what we've learned, what we all know, which is heat continues to be an issue in our communities. We are consistently seeing temperatures that regionally and seasonally exceed anything we've ever seen before. And so it is time to go back and revisit the question of heat, and in particular, the buildings in which we live. So we have started a work group that is really focused on just that question of heat impacts and the potential for cooling in our homes, including rental units and single family homes of any kind. We've had one meeting of that work group. I think there are people on this call who are a part of it, and we thank you very much. It's an open work group. If anybody else gets excited and would like to join, please let me know. I think at this point, and we're still clarifying what we intend to pursue here, but I think I can probably predict that fairly accurately. I think we will be looking at requirements for landlords to upgrade their units with cooling over a period of time. We'll get some crankiness about that, but it's simply the case anymore that habitability requires that people be able to adequately cool themselves in the places where they live. We will probably look at building requirements for new units to ensure that they are built with cooling capacity. Most are, because that's what we need in Oregon. We didn't think we needed to cool units in Oregon, but times are different now. But there's a slice of them that are not. We know if they are putting in cooling, that the building codes will require that those be through heat pumps. So we're getting a couple of objectives in pursuing that initiative. I think we will, without question, look at incentives that are available to people from Energy Trust and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that those incentives are as flexible as possible. And we have found, because of requirements around Energy Trust incentives for that energy efficiency calculation, that sometimes it's difficult to meet those when we know that we need an upgrade that's really about health and safety. We've addressed that in limited ways. I would say the trade out of wood burning stoves is a program that's really predicated on health impacts, and I think we need to look at that for cooling issues. And then we will look at HOAs, making sure that HOAs don't prohibit the installation of heat pumps. And then I think we'll look at funding to keep the programs that we have in place that just don't have enough money going for the long term. And we'll probably put together a little committee to look at what possible funding we might be able to generate, knowing that the general fund is not going to be an option for us next year. But we've got some other interesting ideas. In a separate conversation, I'm talking with CUB about whether or not there's a way to entice or require data centers to put some investment into energy efficiency upgrades or distribution changes to the distribution system that would also allow them to, from their benefit, to free space on the grid for their own purposes. There might be a really great match there. We'll look at the CPP programs to see if there's opportunities to use those programs for cooling programs, and who knows what else we might come up with. So that's the intention here. I think this cooling work, I hope it is of interest to you. I think it is really where we see the intersection of both climate adaptation and climate mitigation, to the degree that we can install devices that cool, but also are much more efficient when it comes to heating, and that have the net impact of saving energy, and health and safety. It's really where all this, it's a test case, cooling, where many of our public goals, public policies come together.
And while we have you here, if you have other thoughts about kind of priority topics that should be leaning into that might be coming up during the legislative session, love to hear them now, or have you follow up with us.
I'm happy to follow up. You have Rep. Gamba. Rep. Gamba is really on the front lines of much of the work that we have to do. I mean, clearly we're going to be looking at how to accommodate data centers in a way that doesn't blow up the grid. I would say another topic that I am very invested in, if anybody wants to talk about it later, is the issue of utilities and wildfire. We know that we are at risk of not achieving the 2021 goals. And when I poke around to figure out what's going on here, some of that is certainly about transmission and generating more energy. But some of it is also about the barriers that have stepped in the way of the utilities. One of those is data centers. So we're taking all the action we can on that front. And one is the need to invest in forest mitigation, which was frankly just something we didn't foresee in 2021, although it's kind of ironic we should have, because we just had the fires of 2020, but we didn't know what this was going to mean. And as long as the utilities are totally obsessed, as they must be, with their need to invest in mitigation, it's proving to be very difficult for them to invest in other energy needs and to grow the grid in the way that we have to do. So I've been working on this since the 25 session. We are really at this point just trying to educate more people on the issue that we face and why it should matter to people who really care about climate change and want to see us move toward renewable or non-fossil fuel electricity. So I've got several bills in the hopper on that front, and we're just waiting to see how that will evolve. But that issue, I will acknowledge, has been very sensitive to people because of the challenge of having one of our largest electricity companies in court with people who lost everything they owned in 2020. But we've got to look at the future and see how we are going to deal with this issue. So those are the two. That's where I put my effort is. Where are the gaps? Where are the barriers that are really getting in the way of the utilities achieving the goals that they were a part of setting out in 2021?
Thank you. Really appreciate that perspective. We've got a couple more minutes. Any questions for Representative Marsh? Commissioner Wasowczynski.
Thank you, Chair. Rep, I just wanted to echo or just to say I think your priorities are spot on, Rep Marsh, and we ran in Multnomah County for about a year and a half a really successful wood stove replacement program, replacing wood stoves with heat pumps. A lot of times it was older adults, who were, had a broken furnace or, were no longer able to really manage the task of heating their home with wood. And the, heat pump could be a real lifesaver for them, quite literally. The other area I think that there's a lot of opportunity is that, the work that Odo has shown is that, when we electrify, we are getting more energy efficient. But also when homes are electric resistance heated, whether that's water heating or home heating, and we can switch them over to a heat pump device, that frees up capacity on the grid too. And so there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for, whether it's any kind of large load, if they're looking for more capacity on the grid, let's get people out of those resistance devices and into some modern heat pump devices, and it's probably going to help quite a bit. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Representative Marsh before she leaves? Thanks for all the work you do in the legislature. Your leadership is really important.
I appreciate you all very much. Thank you. And thanks for giving me a chance today to talk about our cooling efforts. Again, if anybody would like to be a part of that, we'd love to have you. Just let us know. Okay. Bye-bye.
Hey, why don't we go back to the slides just briefly? And we can kind of pick up those. So we go back to the slide we were on before. The next slide. So we have 4 committees that we've established, and energy, transportation, natural climate solutions, and the cross-cutting topics, which includes the built environment. And really appreciate Vice Chair Apter's recognition that we needed a home for that important body of work. And the committees will be meeting between now and October. The topic committees starting next week, actually. And so I just want to briefly touch on the committee, the people who have volunteered to be on the committee or agreed to be on the committee, and then some of the topics that we anticipate that each committee will be digging into. So next slide. Before we go there, just here's a kind of an example or estimate of the time and effort we'll be putting in to the different committees. The report is due December 1st, as I mentioned, and we need to go to production in early November to give Oregon Department of Energy time to take all of our recommendations and the body of the report and put it together and something we can share with the legislature. Next slide. So the Energy Committee, I'm going to participate on all the committees. And looking forward to that. But in addition, on the Energy Committee, Vice Chair Apter and Commissioners Dotson, Sharon, and Bosatinsky will be participating in that. We anticipate that we'll talk about elements of the energy strategy. We'll certainly touch on the data center growth and impacts, and want to elevate some of the recommendations from the Data Center Advisory Committee. Talk about some of the challenges and opportunities, as we just heard from Representative Marsh, about meeting the ambition in House Bill 2021. That is a really big part of how we anticipate meeting our goals, and we want to ensure that we've kind of got clear sailing towards implementing that ambition. We may talk about regional energy markets. I think at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about some legislation, or one of the last meetings, we talked about some legislation that had been introduced this last year on virtual power plants and grid enhancing technologies. And then just also wanting to hear about transmission and all the different elements of transmission that could help us build out transmission more expeditiously. So that's who's on that committee. Next slide. The Transportation Committee is Commissioners Lem, McNichol, Severs, and Steckler. And Commissioner McNichol will be away for part of that discussion, but we'll provide some input early on, and then we'll follow up later on that. This committee will talk, I'm sure, about active modes of transportation, transit, and electrification, as well as some of the findings that we heard about from ODOT a couple of meetings ago about what they see as challenges to meeting the statewide transportation strategy. The governor has convened a new transportation vision work group, so we'll want to be informed by that. And certainly as that vision work group comes out, the whole issue of funding, pricing, and insurance rates and signals we can use from the marketplace to encourage people to reduce vehicle miles traveled, as well as clean fuels. Certainly, there'll be maybe additional things or modifications on what each of these committees will address, but just these are some topics that came up that we assume will be on the list. Next slide, please. For our Natural Climate Solutions Committee, Commissioners Ackerman, Reitman, Thorndike, and hopefully Commissioner Von Hagen will participate. And the topics there will come out of all the great work that has been going on this year and the recommendations that have been made. So we'll be able to take stock of the work that we've done and that staff have done and our contractors have done to and then just sort through which of those will be most timely for us to move forward fastest. Next slide. And then the cross-cutting topics committee or report committee, we asked a few folks to serve on that, Vice Chair Apter and Commissioners Dotson, Garcia, and Mickle. And we've got, that's kind of a big area of cross-cutting work. I think Jeff and I need to take stock a little bit of how quickly we might need that group to get together. But the climate resilience of the building sector, which we just touched on, kind of some of the discussion that we had last time on revenue reform and financing climate action, and including things like the Green Bank and Fund It Superfund. Some of what we heard from Representative Marsh about encouraging owners of data centers to invest in things that or modify the criteria that the Energy Trust uses for making investments in efficiency. We will certainly want to touch on equity and affordability. That's been a big conversation that's been happening as part of that data centers discussion, but above and beyond that, the kind of cross-cutting sector and consumption-based goals, in addition to the natural climate solution goals and other topics that we touched on today, like the cap and invest discussion that came out of the Oregon Prosperity Report. So, and how that should be shaped to preserve and maintain the integrity of the goals set under the Climate Protection Program. Next slide. These are just some of the measures that Representative Marsh touched on, the existing businesses plan measures, some of which need additional funding. I won't go through all of these in detail, but just recognizing that there are a number of businesses planned activities. Next slide. As well as some of the new measures or new funding that could be dedicated to these efforts that were included in the ticker analysis or are included in the ticker analysis. So we don't need to talk about these, but just there's a large body of work around the built environment that we need to put our arms around. Next slide. So that's kind of where things stand. And again, thank you for those who've agreed to serve on these committees. All commissioners will be involved in discussions about all the recommendations. We will talk about them and probably to some extent in August, September, and October, hopefully adopting a set of recommendations in October. And that way we can meet our goals of getting a report to the legislature on December 1st. So any questions or comments about where things stand? Any topics that you think were not mentioned, Commissioner McNichol?
Yeah, I didn't see CPP on there, but maybe that's just inherent in the energy policy, or I'm not sure where, but I think maybe commenting on the progress of that. But to step back on the big picture about the report, is the intention of the report to reflect on the past or to project what we think needs to happen in the future, or both?
A little bit of both. Probably the most, in my view, and again, it's welcome other people's opinions, but I think the recommendations section is the most important. What do we think needs to happen next? Where are we seeing obstacles or barriers to addressing our climate goals? Where do we see new opportunities? So to me, that's the most important, but I think providing some context for that by speaking to some of the work that has been done already is also some important context to make sure that we get conveyed to legislators, especially newer legislators that have maybe not been in the legislature for very long and might benefit from some of that. I think one of the recommendations that we talked about in March was the kind of importance of being as explicit as we can be and honing in on the recommendations. And so we may end up putting some of what we might have put in earlier reports in the body of the report. We might put more of that in appendices. but both are important, and it's important to, I think, have one of the things that we'll do, and that we've asked the agencies for is, what are some specific products that they've produced that we can provide links to so that people can kind of have a place where they can go and find information easily, because we cover a lot of broad topics, and it's, as you all know, it's hard to kind of get up to speed on all the topics that our commission covers, and that's true for Oregonians in general. So we can kind of be an expert in an area or two, but it's hard to keep up with all of it, and having a place where we can kind of synthesize as much of that as possible in the most efficient way, I think is important.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Wen?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this topic. If I could take a minute just to say, as I've come to understand, the commission has multiple roles, and one of them seems to be to engage with the public and with stakeholders. So as part of this process, if I could suggest as well that any new ideas coming from the public or from stakeholders and knowledgeable people who are following the commission's work, this seems to be a place where some new ideas could be very helpful for people to hear about. And the fact that we've discussed how there's identification of a gap potentially in meeting the long-term goals, to me that just suggests more of an awareness that we have more to do, and we have more. If there's ideas out there, we should be open to hearing new ideas. So if I could just encourage the public or stakeholders, anybody following our work to try to share those ideas so that we can have the portfolio get bigger. We've had some good discussions about how the recent drawback of federal support is having impact on our ability to meet our goals. So to me, that's even more reason for us to figure out what we can do in Oregon ourselves, without depending on as much federal support, while still asking for that federal support. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lynn. And we did get some written comments in advance of this meeting that were shared with all of the commissioners, and including interest in having us dig in deeper on greenhouse gas emission reduction technologies out, beyond just natural working lands, but some of the technological sideboards of that. So appreciate the public comment and recommendation of us taking on some additional topics. Commissioner Garcia.
If possible, could we have the the sticky note exercise thing where we talked about the report? Could that be reshared? I would love to refresh myself on some of the ideas there.
I think most of that was summarized in the memo that we looked at last month. I don't know that we have the sticky note still. I think it would be helpful if we did to share that out.
Chair, the results of the sticky note exercise are included in the appendix of the work plan, so I can drop that in the chat.
Awesome, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Jeff. Other comments about the biennial report or? Okay. Well, again, thanks to those who agreed to participate in that. If there's a topic that anyone else is particularly interested in tracking, we can't all meet together. And I can't remember now the sequential conversation issues this might raise, but if there's somebody else who wants to be CC'd on materials, let us know, and as long as we don't violate the sequential discussion provision in state government, and we can share those out too. But everybody will get to hear all of this and debate it in September and October. All right. Don't be shy about sharing information if it comes to you after the meeting about the biennial report and any reflections that you might have. We'll go to the next slide, Jeff. So we will be, we have a report that is due on the Natural and Working Lands fund allocations that Odo and the fund agencies are working on already. Jeff and company have been developing an operations and procedures manual to clarify some of these things like sequential conversations so that we all know how all this works. We will continue to have conversations about the report to the legislature. I've invited some folks to come talk to us about data centers, in addition to Commissioner Dotson, one of the co-chairs of that advisory committee will join us, and invited Commissioner Powers to talk to us about the Power Act and its implementation and some of the ideas that I think Representative Marsh and others have raised. And then in October, we will spend a lot of time focusing in on our recommendations to legislature and hearing an update on the statewide transportation strategy. These are probably not the only topics we'll cover in these next 3 meetings, but these are kind of the core things that we will need to get done. Does anybody have any questions or comments about my next meetings? Well, with that, I will conclude and close the July 17th meeting of the Oregon Climate Action Commission and give you all 15 minutes back. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate all the input.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.